Hello, Motorrada World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking MotoGP with myself, Rob Portman, and my co-host, Paul Scott. Paul, hope you're doing well and ready to talk some MotoGP from Argentina.
No, absolutely, Rob. The whole day I've been sucking throat lozenges, so I'm prepared, boy. We can go as long as you want. Yeah, I think it's going to be a long night, but most certainly a very topical evening because there's so much going on that we need to chat about.
Yeah, there is. I know the racing's not necessarily like as entertaining in a way as we want with overtakes and everything. Mark and Alex kind of stamping their authority on the championship at the moment. But there's still a lot of talking points, a lot of things going on further down the field, all around the field, certain riders and teams and everything going on. So, yeah, we'll certainly keep everyone entertained. Yeah, Samkelo already has a message. Brad needs to look somewhere else. That KTM bike won't get any better. So it starts. We've got a big KTM talking point, Samkelo. So sit back, relax, get yourself nice and comfortable, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Van Erasmus, good evening, guys. Cannot agree more, Samkelo. Yvonne Pretorius, I'm disappointed because you weren't here 45 minutes ago waiting. You've only just come in at 5:53, which is it's 5:53 my time, just before 6 p.m.
So 7:53, yeah.
7:53 SA time. Van Erasmus, Richer is making a mark, and yes, Yvonne, well done there. Yes, of course, we're going to start off talking about our three SA superstar, or our two other SA superstars in Richer Woodley and Darryn Binder. Wayne Taylor, good evening. Well done to the boys. Solid performance. MotoGP, however, is so lopsided now. It's crazy. We need a separate class for the other manufacturers. That would be an exciting battle. Garfilo, evening all. Yvonne Pretorius, I mentioned already. Gavin Silverstein, Robert Swart, Jaco Das, CP Boerts, Constanelius. I know I've said that wrong. Paolo Chiacchetti, James Thompson, Brett Lawson, Kevin Faree, Deep Sea Diver Schmidt. It's great to have him. Dux Leko, Umbongonya. Good evening, guys. I hope I've said that right, but welcome to the show. Jacques Claessens. A lot of nice new names that I haven't seen before. So hello and welcome. If this is your first time, welcome to the show. If you are a repeat offender, you know what it's all about. It's an open conversation. Get your comments in, and let's talk as much MotoGP as we possibly can. Mart van Jaarsveld, evening all, listening while painting. Oh, nice, Mark. That's brilliant. Georgie Haji, how you, George Haji? How you, my buddy? Hope you're keeping well. Trevor Dalglish also saying hi. Shane Sparg. So let's start, Paul, with our other two SA superstars in Richer Woodley in the Moto3 Championship. First of all, we said rookie season, first time out in Argentina. It was about not crashing your brains out, taking as much of the experience as possible, but also getting the best results possible. Because at the end of the day, you're there for results. Team wants results, and again, just as he did in Thailand, I thought he did a fantastic job. Wasn't reckless, wasn't getting in the way of riders, wasn't overriding, wasn't crashing everywhere. Looked like he put his head down, very mature head on those young shoulders. Richer's always had it, and pulled off was another solid weekend in 15th, the last point, and another great weekend for our young Richer.
Absolutely, Rob, and we've spoken about it many times. And first of all, good evening to everyone who's tuned in. We've spoken about it many times in the past, specifically with Darryn, saying just finish the races. And I'm not pointing fingers at Darryn in any way. I'm just saying we've highlighted this, and Richer's doing exactly that. And I mean, look at his qualifying. He was 0.02 of a second off making it straight into Q2. I mean, that's insane. He's showing us he's got what it takes. And he's learning, and he's putting some big names under pressure. He's racing with Foggia nearly the whole race. This is a guy with lots of Moto3 experience and Moto2 experience back to Moto3. So, yeah, I really think he's doing himself and his team proud in that they've got a rider. Yes, they want a guy who's fast, no doubt. But you also don't want a guy who lap 3 tosses it into the kitty litter, lap 4, whatever. And he hasn't done that. He's been good. And I think this just goes probably the worst track to ride on in terms of not knowing the circuit, low grip, difficult scenario. I think he's just going to get better. Remember, in Europe, he probably knows 2/3 of the track from Red Bull rookies. So I really think this he's the real deal, and we can be really proud of what he's done so far.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you've said there, especially about the proud part. Really, really impressed with what Roche Mudley has done in his first opening 2 Grand Prix in his career so far. There's going to be a very fruitful and successful career. There's no doubt about it. Darryn Binder in the Moto2 left it late in qualifying, as he seems to always do. You know, qualifying's never been one of the strong points, but did what he needed to do, got into those front couple of rows to try and make himself as competitive as he could in the race. Got a decent start. Well, not really. Actually got quite a crappy start, lost a couple of positions, fought his way back up. And then, you know, as with Darryn, you kind of get into the stressful point where I saw him started gaining and he was in that battle and I thought, oh God, Daz, please don't cook your tires, or, you know, don't be overriding it and trying to stay with him and make a mistake. But, you know, a nice mature ride from Darryn. It looked like he almost got to the point where he realized, right, this is my pace. This is my comfortable pace. I'm kind of, you know, I'm not under any massive kind of threat. Bring the bike home, leading Gresini bike, still, you know, a new kind of project and a new environment for him. And yeah, proud of Darryn Binder and what he did this weekend in, as you said, what could be a very tricky Argentina sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And his teammate, Albert Arenas, is a very experienced Moto2 rider. So to be beating him, and he was ahead of him in all the qualifying. So it's not a case of, he got lucky. He was faster than him the whole weekend. So I really think it was a great ride from him. Exactly what you say. When Vietti caught him, it was about 3 laps from the end. I thought, oh, Darryn, please don't, you know, I'm not saying give up the position. He certainly didn't do that. But don't now go and override the bike and end up with a nil point in the gravel trap, and he didn't do that. So I think Darryn last year was definitely a very good learning curve. We discussed it a few times. This year he's got the equipment and now this added maturity and race craft. So it's such a pity that he got no points 2 weekends ago, because even if he had got 5 or 6 points, would have put him in the top 10. And clearly he's top 10 material, he's top 6 material without a shadow of a doubt.
And I know it's we've a lot of people have pulled him apart, but certainly South Africans, he left a bad taste in our mouth. But we've got to, James Thompson says here, we've got to give a shout out to Jake Dixon, class of the field this last weekend. And, you know, I look at that and I've always found myself wanting to defend Jake Dixon. You know, after the Silverstone incident, it was very hard with Darryn in the way he just came out and the way he treated that whole situation. But I've always seen a rider there in Jake Dixon. There's a rider. There's a talent there. And he showed it this weekend. I mean, he dominated that race. That was as dominant as it gets, as we've seen from Pedro Acosta, as we've seen from the likes of Brad Binder in the past. It really was a dominant ride, and there's a fantastic rider there. If someone or Jake Dixon himself can just manage when and how to open your mouth and what comes out of it, there could be a really good career path for that guy. He's got the British passport. He's clearly got a lot of backing, because despite the ups and downs and everything, he still finds himself in a good seat. But it was a brilliant ride from Jake Dixon, and it reminded us again, fantastic talent. Now just manage yourself a bit better, and there's no doubt that this could be the British rider that we've wanted and everyone wants to see potentially going into MotoGP.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll give credit where it's due. He was the class of the field this weekend. The problem is he's very much a Maverick Vinales type. You know, for the next 3 weekends, we might not even remember that he was on the starting grid. So, you know, he needs to get that consistency that we discuss about the Binders and, you know, 1 or 2 other riders. He needs that if he wants to be a serious contender. I don't know if he's got that. To me, his arrogance takes over. And we know that's the downfall of many a person, because you become blasé. You think you're bigger than the sport itself, or whatever the case is. But one thing I really like about Jake Dixon, the graphics on his helmet. And let me tell you, nothing else. That's it. I like his helmet. He's got a proper helmet.
Yeah, he does have a good looking helmet. I must say, I also do it. Dixon, here we go. Olimoto, Dixon is inconsistent, but was a superb ride. Gonzalez will win the title, I think. So pretty much matching what you said. Is that inconsistent?
I agree with Olimoto to a point, but me personally, I'd like to see Aaron Canet win it. I really would. There's just something about him. He's the underdog. He doesn't do himself any favors, but damn that I can try. I mean, if you saw that high side he had on Friday, I thought that's it. Collarbone down. He was sitting in the gravel trap, holding his shoulder. Man, he just comes out and races as hard as he can. I do believe, though, Gonzalez at the moment looks to be the class of the field. In Moto2, no one dominates. No one's going to win 12 races like Alonso did in Moto3. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting championship. I'd like to see Canet giving him a run for his money.
Yeah, I agree. I like Canet too, Paul, but I think Gonzalez is going to be the man to beat. Yeah, I would agree with the sentiment. I do like the dig deep determination that is Aaron Canet, but
but he's also shown that inconsistency,
yeah,
Rob.
Well, this is the thing. There's a couple of riders in that paddock that have done that. So yeah, let's see. It's one of the more exciting Moto2 championships now because there's no one that you can really put your finger on that's going to run away with it. I think you know you can highlight Gonzalez, Canet, Dixon now potentially as favorites, but I don't think there's anyone that's going to run away with it. The great 418 or 481, get over it. Jake ain't arrogant. You're still mad about the Binder situation. Get a grip. So I mean, the great 481. I think it was his arrogance that created that situation in Silverstone, and he got a lot of flack, not just from South African fans, but from British fans, from motorcycle racing fans. And I've watched Jake Dixon from his British Superbike days. I was a huge fan when Shaky Byrne was his manager. I've always seen an amazing talent there, and I was a big fan. I did see and hear some things in the paddock that did lean towards that word arrogance, which is why we've kind of mentioned it. And this is what I talk about the management. I do think there's a talent there. There's a rider there. We've spoken about it with the Vinales and everyone else. It's about personal management. And that's the difference between the guys that go on to be world champions and the most successful at the sport and those guys that, I don't want to say are grid fillers because they're more than that, but just go through their career, just going from one team to another. And so Jake Dixon is that guy. I think the arrogance has been his handicap. But I do think, and he spoke about it as well, if I watched the TNT broadcast over the weekend, Neil Hodgson, Gavin Emmett, and all of them were kind of talking about Jake's, taking a step back. He's looked at himself and he's definitely a fresh, he got a fresher look, a more mature look about him this year. I think in many ways, his strength is his arrogance. Some riders need that arrogance. They need to put that forward that's their confidence. That's how they breathe their confidence. And you can see it with Jake Dixon, the way he celebrates in that, but it can sometimes be taken as arrogance. Every single rider in that paddock, any single motorcycle rider I've ever met in my life, including my best friend Sheridan and all of those guys, you have to have a certain arrogance about yourself. As a top sportsman, you have to. Some of them manage it better than others, and I think that's something that Jake just needs to manage a bit more to really become a fan favorite in many ways, but really put, let his riding and his results do the talking rather than his mouth on a microphone sometimes when it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and if you say that the guys from TNT, I mean, isn't Hodgson his manager at the moment? So he was last year. Anyway, let's just hope that that's the case, because certainly, without a doubt, the guy is talented. We've seen it. Last year, he had flashes of brilliance. This year, one question I want to ask. When he finished, he got off the bike, he rubbed, hugged, stroked the front suspension. They back on Olin's. That to me was a bit of a up yours to WP. That's my opinion. And he didn't have a flag saying Olin's or anything. That's how I interpreted it, because it just looked like he was so happy with the package. I don't know. I don't know what you thought about that, if you noticed it at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I noticed that I didn't really put two and two together like you did there. I just saw a rider, and Neil Hodgson and Gavin Emmett, obviously they boast him quite a lot as the British talent, which he is. But they were just saying it, talking to him and seeing him behind the scenes. He's just a very happy rider in that environment at the moment. And this could be the platform for him to really go shine now. He's had, just like Darryn Binder and a lot of other riders in Moto2, they've had really good opportunities, but it is time now to kind of showcasing that on a more consistent level. And the exact same can be said for Darryn Binder, as I said in a lot of it's not that we're just picking on Jake Dixon. That motor, and that's the exciting part about the Moto2 field, as I just said. There's so many riders that you can say, right, he can be a world champion, but he needs this and this and this and this. And that's what makes it just this kind of open playing field at the moment. So a lot of British fans don't like Dixon. Most back him, but he annoys some people with the things he says. I used to watch his dad race when I was a kid. I have been trackside for 2 of his wins. So that's exactly what it is, Ollie Moto. I've also spoken to a lot of fans here, and I've even heard things from his British Superbike days. But this is not the Jake Dixon show. I just looked there and I went, the guy can ride a motorcycle. I quite enjoyed when he did that wild card on the Petronas bike. I thought he put on quite a good show in the MotoGP class. But you need the whole package, not just how fast you are on track. It's what you do off track. It's how you talk to media. That was certainly a huge dent in what he did there. You know, Neil Hodgson and TNT have a big part to play in that because they shoved the microphone in his face. We can relive those days, but we're not going to. But yeah, I was impressed, and you can't take anything away from the performance that he put in on the weekend. So let's see how it goes for the rest of the season. It's still a very long season. We've seen this before from Jake and other riders. It's about the consistency now. Paul, let's go on to the main man. I mean, it's hard not to talk about him. I said last week or after the Thailand race, I look at Marc Marquez walking around in those everything red helmet, red boots, red gloves, red leathers, red bike, and I just see Superman. I just see a guy that just is so calm. And I watched that guy this weekend again, and I know the racing was boring, but for me, in terms of racing action, for me, it's not boring watching a guy go that fast, be in that control around a racetrack and do what he did. Do you think this is the best version of Marc Marquez? I know it's only 2 rounds in. I know that. But, geez, I mean, to do what he's doing to this field and the way he's doing it, it was impressive.
Yes and no. So if you go back to, I think it was 2016, the year he won 10 in a row. You know, to win 10 in a row on a bike that was, the Honda was good then, relatively speaking to everything else. But it's for the last few years, it hasn't been a standout bike like the Ducati clearly is at the moment. So I say yes and no. The thing so part of me says that year that he dominated, I think it was 2016. I think that to now is his best year ever. But so far this year, what's got to scare everybody who is not a Marquez fan or everyone else racing against him, he hasn't crashed once on a race weekend. Marc Marquez is renowned. I mean, the jokes that have been going on about crash cares and what have you for years, he's been renowned at finding the limit by falling over. And he hasn't done that yet. So does that mean he's just so comfortable with the bike that he doesn't have to worry about it? Or does it mean he hasn't got to the point yet where he thinks he's riding that bike at the limit? Now, if part 2 is the correct answer, imagine what he's going to do to them when he feels that he's found the limit. Because right now, he's not running away by 12 seconds. Yeah, he probably could. And obviously this weekend, he said he just for the first half of the race, he wasn't comfortable with the grip. He just didn't feel that the rear grip was what he needed. Then the tire wore and he got better, and then he picked up the pace and could drill everyone. But so yes, I do think we're seeing the best of him. Better than that 2017-16 year? Not at the moment. I think we'll see that later on in the year. I think he's still being very circumspect's the wrong word. He's holding back. He doesn't want to show because he hasn't been put under pressure. The first time Pecco, Alex, Frankie Morbidelli, Brad Binder, the first time they put him under big pressure, and big pressure must mean someone's pulling 2/10 a lap on him. Then we'll see the real Marquez. Then you'll see what that guy can really do. And I look forward to the day that happens.
JP Sviek, I did mean the red Power Ranger. He does look like a Power Ranger in many ways. A lot of people sharing the same sentiments as you, Paul. He hasn't crashed because he hasn't been pushed to that level that he needs to. It's all so under control. I watched both the sprint race, the whole weekend again. Apart from that one little rear slide that he had in the main race on Sunday when he was chasing Alex, other than that, looked fully in control. Broke his own lap record that had been there for 11 years, said, I'll go into the 46ers, went into the 46ers. He just ticks every box now. Even in the main race, when Alex Marquez went past, I went, this is Marc Marquez. He's not, I mean, you can call it playing if you want, but you know what? He's like, okay, well, let my brother pass, give him a little bit of airtime at the front, boost his, not taking nothing away from Alex Marquez because he has really risen to the occasion so far this season. But it's almost like you could see Marc kind of thinking that, okay, well, I can just run away with this. I can really run away with this and make this seriously boring. But that's not going to be good for me or the sport, So let me try and make this a little bit entertaining. Oops, I ran wide in turn 1. Alex goes past. Alex gets a spotlight of, so there he's sitting behind his brother, like going, very proud and look at my brother, he's shining, he's in the spotlight, and he had to push. You don't get a rear wheel slide like that because you're not pushing, but at the same time, could he have got it because his concentration levels were, when you want to go, you've got to, and you want 100% concentration, you've got to be flat out all the time. Could it have been, I'm just spitballing here, but Pecco said it at Thailand. He played with him. For me, he played with him again. As you said, if he wanted to win by 12 seconds, he could have. If someone upped their game by X amount of time, he could have upped his game. When he wanted to pass Alex, he passed Alex. It was all just, the thing with Marc is, as you said, it's all just so under control. There's no, he's not under pressure at all, and he's dominating against these guys that have been the Peccos, that have been in the project for so long, the guys that haven't gone through what he has gone through, injury-wise, mentally-wise, everything, and he's just dominating them. So it's hard to see, and I know Ollie Moto and a couple of other people have said, yeah, but it's Wayne Taylor as well. It's going to make MotoGP boring. What do you do? I was watching it with my gran on the weekend as well, and she was like, but isn't this getting a bit boring? I was like, well, what do you, same argument with Ducati. Well, what do you want them to do? Do you want Ducati to get restrictions and stuff and slow down, and Marc to cut 4 fingers off and slow? I mean, how much more must the guy slow himself down? He took his arm, you know what I mean? So what do you do? We've just got to, in some way, sit back and just enjoy the speed and the resurgence of this guy that a couple of years ago we nearly lost,
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. I think, what you said, every word is spot on. For MotoGP fans, appreciate him. I'm not saying you have to support him. Appreciate what he's doing. Just going back to him letting Alex ride in front of him for 12 laps, whatever it was. One thing Marc did say, he said through, I think it was turns 3, 6, and 7, he said Alex was definitely quicker than him. And he even worried, because turn 6 is that beautiful left-hander where they were light in the tires. And Marc on a left-hander normally blitzes everyone. And he said he couldn't believe how fast Alex was through there. So that's another maturity sign of Marc to say, well, I've checked the data. I know how good Alex is through there. Let me ride behind him for a while and see what he's doing that I'm not doing. So that's another, almost a mature thing to say, okay, well, I'll learn from him. But saying that, he made one mistake. Alex got the gap to 0.4 of a second, took Marc 3 corners, and he was back on him again. So, that's, I think we're just seeing at the moment, domination that Pecco is now, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, this is going to get in Pecco's head. Well, now he's saying he wants to go back to the 24 model. So clearly he's a bit directionless, and that's the worst thing I think that can happen to him.
Yeah, Daluk Solo. Sorry, Daluk. I hope I'm saying your name right, but I'll bring it up on the screen here. He's got a question for you. Paul, what do you think about Pecco? He's on the best bike after all, but looks like he's riding a factory KTM bike. Yeah, I mean, you touched on it briefly there, Paul. It's certainly rattled the cage of Pecco.
Yeah, so the fact to say that it looks like he's riding a KTM, now you're making that comparison when you're comparing to Marc Marquez. He just seems directionless, which we've always said is Pecco's strength. Don't worry what he does on Friday morning. Friday morning, Pecco is getting his ducks in a row to win on Sunday. Now what seems to be happening is Friday morning, he's going north and he feels like everyone else is going south. Then in qualifying, he's struggling to make it straight into Q2. He's under pressure. I think he's rattled. There's no doubt. Because of the fact, and everybody should feel rattled, but Alex is not teammate to Marc. Frankie Morbidelli is not teammate. Pecco is the teammate and he's the number 1, supposedly. And now this apple cart has been upset. There's no boxing. There's no upset. Pecco's trying to deal with it by saying, I need to look at what I can do better, which is probably the right thing. But he can't keep doing that week after week. So he's definitely going to have to make some drastic changes. I think by going back to the old bike, he's making the wrong move. Because the 25 model, we know it's a 24.9. It's going to get better and better. Now he'll be back on the old bike. How much development are they going to do on that? Difficult question, but certainly he's the one that now has to make a big step forward.
I think, I thought about it a lot this weekend, and I watched, as I do, just when I get a little bit of time, watch old documentaries and stuff. And I look at Pecco's situation, and it was always going to be hard. Argentina's never really been a Pecco track for some reason. Thailand, he's never really shone, whereas Marc's, shone at both of them, pretty much shone everywhere. The tough part for Pecco, I watched the celebrations after Thailand, and you could see Pecco sitting on his bike waiting to take the team photo, and he's waiting there, and Marc's celebrating. And now all of a sudden these Italian guys are doing this whole Marc is on fire, da da da.
Yeah.
Marc brings that whole spirit. So it's not just this little celebration, the champagne spraying, and you've got to sit there as a 2-time world champion and a 3-time world champion and a worthy world champion. You've got to sit there as a number one man watching this team that you've kind of honed and has become your family now celebrating with us. It's got to hit you, and it happened again this weekend. And David Tardozzi's all over Marc, and the champagne's going, and you've got to sit there and just eat humble pie in many ways. So I looked at that, and I think, that can't be easy. Never mind the fact that you're on track, you're riding your heart out, and it's just not working for you. I do think the bigger picture, as Pecco's kind of said in his comments after the races, I'm not a fourth place rider. I don't have the same feeling with this bike. Is it panic station going to the 24? Maybe, because he's already 30-something points behind Marc. He's looking at this Marc that's just not going to make any mistakes, and that was competing against him on the old bike. Now he's on the same bike, and, I have no answers for this guy. So I'd rather be on the same bike he's on and try and challenge him rather than trying to figure this out. So I can understand why he's doing that. But I do think, as he said, I will be back, and I think we're going to get to the European rounds, and it's going to be more competitive. I think Pecco's, we've said it, we know the rider that's there. He's just got to get past these flyaways, get back into Europe, and try and find that momentum. The problem for him is, how big's that gap going to be? How dented is your confidence? You can say all day, and he said it again. It's about me being calm in these situations, because this time last year I had less points than I had now, which is a good confidence thing to tell yourself. But at the same time, you weren't dealing with a Marc Marquez on a full factory Ducati. That's untouchable. And I looked at that, and again, just now this is pulling into one of the Valentino Rossi documentaries, and we spoke about it before. Pecco always had a teammate that he, always had his thumb over. He always felt in control. I didn't feel that threatened by, you're going to win some races, but in an overall season, I've got you taped. And Rossi, I watched a couple of his documentaries because I just obviously love the guy and I love watching his stuff. But some interesting points were there was when he says how cross he was with Yamaha. Why did they bring Lorenzo in after everything I did for them? I didn't deserve a teammate that fast.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not saying that's what Pecco's going through, but you know what I mean? It could be the mentality of, okay, I know Pecco was welcomed with open arms and he's played the media to perfection. I think Pecco is the gentleman and he is that sportsman in that way. But, he's got to be looking at this going, this guy's spraying champagne and Marc's on fire and everyone's kind of bought into this whole Marc Marquez. That's where Marc destroys people for me, is obviously on track, but it's that off track. He knows that Pecco's sitting there waiting for the photo to be taken. So instead of going, okay, let's just take the photo quickly, then I'll celebrate. No. You sit on your bike and you watch me celebrate with my team and turn these Italians into Spanish, fanboys for a second, and all, you know what I mean? He uplifts the whole team. Pecco and them and the other Italians have never celebrated like that. Yeah, there's a celebration, but not at that level. And Marc's bringing that, and Pecco's got to sit there and take it for now. As I said, I have full confidence that Pecco will fight back and he will be closer. The hard part for him, they go to Kota next. I mean, for goodness sake, Wayne Taylor's talking about here, like you must watch Neil Hodgson clip of him breaking down Marc Marquez style going into a corner. Scary how that Ducati shifts weight from front, blah, 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 blah. And that's the biggest difference. We've spoken about it before, the balance of that bike, how in control Marc is on that bike. He just, okay, I'm going to brake later now and pass. And he passes and he hits the line. He's not crashing the bike. This is a guy that, as you said, all he did was crash. And he came out and said, that's how I find my limit. The guy is so in control, and Pecco's got to be sitting there going, okay, and maybe is it going back to the 24? Is it exactly that? Well, let me go onto what he's onto a bike that I dominated and won 11 races on or whatever last year, and see that. But that could backfire, because if you go to your known loved motorcycle and you're still being hammered, geez, then that's even more of a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will really set him back. So me personally, if I was Ducati, I kind of wouldn't give him that option, because this bike is working for Marc. Pecco was great in all the testing. He wasn't quite at Marc's pace, but he certainly was fine. So I don't know what the solution for Pecco is, other than he needs to, which he's managed to do every other year. But as you said, he hasn't been fighting Marc Marquez. He needs to up his game. He did it with Martin on numerous occasions. He did it against Quartararo. He could just up his game. Is that step now that he was at a level where he had kind of plateaued, and now Marc's managed to move that level up a level? I'm not too sure. I think that might be part of the problem, that Pecco's kind of, he's at his ceiling right now, which is a stupid thing for me to say now that I've said it, because I do believe Pecco is a better rider than Alex Marquez, and I take nothing away from Alex. But Alex has found something. If you had said at the beginning or the end of last year, no, Marc's biggest competitor in the first two races is going to be his brother, we would have laughed. We would have said, don't be ridiculous. But something's shifted. Is it a mental change to Pecco, which I think is part of the problem? Alex, no doubt, has upped his game without a doubt. There's no question about that. But if you were honest with yourself, head decision, not heart decision, is he a better rider than Pecco over a championship? Well, he's never shown that. Okay, he's never been on identical equipment. We understand that. But even on the Ducatis that he's been on, there's always been 2 or 3 Ducatis besides the factory bike ahead of him. So Pecco, something's gone wrong with Pecco. And it could be that the scenario you mentioned with Rossi versus Lorenzo, has this thing now backfired on Ducati, not in a bad way, where now they've put the cat amongst their own pigeon, by putting Marquez in the garage with Bagnaia. It's such a difficult one for him. I don't want to see the guy struggling. I want to see him up there and being competitive. But the argument you and lots of people are making is, but wait till we get to Europe. Marc's equally good in Europe, and there are tracks where Marc will dominate. I can't think of a track, possibly Barcelona, where Pecco's dominated. But there's probably 3 tracks in Europe where Marc's going to smash everyone. So it's going to be very difficult for Pecco. He can't rely on that. He's got to start focusing on the next week and the next week, and not saying, but when we get to Barcelona and where, that's not going to work for him, because he can't suddenly discard Kota in 2 weeks' time. He's already 31 points behind. He can't get to Qatar 2 weeks after that and be 50 points behind. It's just putting him under more and more and more pressure.
Yeah, look, I don't think the calendar was very kind to Pecco in this scenario. I'm not saying it was completely favoring Marc Marquez. He's an 8-time world champion. Let's not forget this. As you said, the guy's going to be good just about everywhere. And in the past, when he hasn't been good, he's found a way to be good and made it work. So, we always knew Pecco was going to be up against the most dangerous beast probably MotoGP has ever seen, the most dangerous combination of Marc Marquez on this just sorted Ducati that just can't do no wrong. I think, as you said, it's Pecco's got to go. I do like the fact that Pecco last year would have maybe pushed and gone out of his comfort zone and crashed and been even more behind. The fact that he's looking at the positive, going, I've got more points than I had at this stage last year already, but he's got to remember he lost the championship last year. It's about managing those days. The problem is you can't manage those days in 4th place, being beaten by 2 other Ducatis. I mean, there was one post on Facebook, I think it was at Now Moto News, put on the overall lap sheets, or MotoPG or MotoGP News, or one of them, where he actually was the 2nd slowest Ducati. Overall fast time, Pecco Bagnaia I'm talking about. So he had no pace. He had no answer. In qualifying in Q2 at one stage, it looked like he was going to pull something out the bag. Couldn't get that final sector right. And, he just wasn't there. And I know he kept trying to almost boost himself and play himself up in the media and say, no, we've closed the gap to Marc and Alex. When in reality, he didn't. But he's going to have to go to Kota and dig deep and find something he hasn't been able to find in the past at a track that he's never really been good at. The biggest problem he and all of them have is you've got to, limit the damage when Marc's this dominant, and in 4th place is not damage limitations for him. Alex Marquez, yes, brilliant. And we'll touch upon him now. Is he going to be there all the way to the end? I think it might be a case of where he's on a setup bike, setup while everyone's still kind of finding their way. Alex has taken advantage of that. There's no doubt he stepped up his game, but we're going to get to tracks where he's going to be under pressure, and we've seen it where Alex can sometimes just fizzle out and get lost. Is Marc helping that? There was a comment from, I can't remember who it was, Wayne Taylor or Robert Swart or one of the guys earlier saying, to him, it looks like Marc's almost saying, you know what, come follow me a bit. I'll show you some lines. Go ahead of me, put it into practice, almost trying to drag his brother level almost up to him to be that rider between him and Pecco, not only in the race, but in the overall championship, to kind of say, look, my brother's beating the blue eye. This is how Marc trying to just chinks away at your armor. All these little things. I'll dominate you on track, first of all. Pecco said it himself. He was playing with us. So he's already, I've showed Pecco I can play with him. The second thing is I'll celebrate like, I've won a world championship every single race and Marc is on fire and everything in front of you. And the third is, okay, well, let me bring my brother, who's no one really rates that high, or, is definitely not better than Pecco Bagnaia, on the worst Ducati out of all the Ducatis in team-wise, no disrespect to Cressini. So he's ticking all those boxes, and that's what's starting to just get on the Pecco nerve at the moment. And it's working, but it's up to Pecco. I think Pecco's biggest strength in the past has been how much of a worthy champion he is. He's able to reset in a lot of situations, and he's going to really need those qualities now to keep himself in this championship hunt. Because as a couple of other people have said, Wayne Taylor and him, at this point in time, you can see Marc winning 10, 12 races in a row. And I can see Pecco not being second a lot of those races, or third, or I could see him being in a fourth place like this if a Morbidelli wakes up and tire choice and comes into play. So yeah, Pecco's got to get that mentality that won him those championships, and again just highlights that he's up against an even bigger threat that Jorge Martin was, and it just in some ways proves that Ducati made the right choice in going with Marc Marquez.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if anyone had any doubts besides Martin, who clearly had lots of doubts, that's been laid to rest. That was laid to rest after day one of the testing at the beginning of the year. Just one thing I want to highlight, and we're obviously going to talk about Alex now, but I read that Marc and Alex, look, they thick as thieves, eh? So there was a thing saying that Marc told Alex, if I'm leading the race, lap 14 and 15, that's when I'm putting in my attack. Doesn't matter who's behind me. So Alex knew the plan. Alex was then in front for those laps. That was when he set his 2 fastest race laps. So now here's a guy coaching his brother. Basically, that's what he's doing. He's not telling Pecco that. That came out in the media after the race. It's too late for Pecco to say, well, I'm going to make a plan C to deal with their plan A and B. So there's absolutely no doubt that what Marc is feeding to Alex taking on board. Absolutely no doubt. How much is Marc sharing with Pecco to help him get on board? I'm going to say 0. If he sees all the data, Marc doesn't care. Marc's telling Alex, this is what I'm going to do in the race. I mean, how much of an advantage is that? If you know your brother for lap 14 and 15 is going to go flat out to pull that gap, okay, let's save a little bit of tire. The guys behind don't know that. So yeah, I think these two are definitely, Marc's seen that Alex has upped his game, and he's doing everything he can to take him with him.
CP Butts makes an interesting comment here. TNT said Pecco is copying Jorge Martin's settings. As you've just said, how transparent is it with Marc? And you even say that when I was teammates with Sheridan on the same motorcycle, the same everything, and I was battling, it was a case of, okay, well, just put his settings in my bike. Yes, I could not ride that bike the way Sheridan did. So it's easy to say that. So was, Martin and Pecco's style aligned so much that they could both feed off each other, and that's what we saw. But Marc's just got this, or he's either not sharing it or they just can't adapt to it. But there's certainly something missing from Pecco. I think it is, like I said, I do want to look at the bigger picture. I think it is tracks that don't suit him, that he hasn't kind of proven himself at before. But in this current World Championship with Marc the way he is, you don't have the luxury of these off weekends in fourth. And this is not quite my track. You've got to make it work. I know he said, I'm not a fourth place rider, and he's not. He's absolutely not. But you finished fourth. So you've got to rectify that. No matter what you think of Kota or Qatar or wherever else you're going, you've got to fix that problem, and you've got to fix it soon, because this championship could be over in a couple of races.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to say this because it's just something that I think could be going through his head. He's a double MotoGP world champion. Is he now thinking in his head, okay, I've reached my ceiling, I'm happy, I'm 2 times world champion, that's it. So what if Marc beats me? I'm not for 1 second suggesting that's his mentality. But is there that little man at the back of his head knocking and saying, so what? You've got loads of cash in the bank. You've achieved because all of them, and Martin said it at the end of last year, I've achieved my lifelong dream to be MotoGP world champion. Now to go and set the same goal, it's going to have the same result. Yes, you're world champion. That's massive. But it's the exact same result that you had at the end of last year. Is it for some people to reset and chase that again is difficult. That's why the Marquezes, the Rossis, the Duans, they were exceptional because they could chase it year after year after year. Where some people get to that and when things aren't going their way, they've achieved more than 99.999% of the world will ever achieve. So they have every right to take a step back. I wonder if that factors into their thinking in any way. I've got no idea. I just do. I'm very much that at this level, the psychological game, and we saw Dovizioso got a rider coach and
mental coach,
psychologist, mental coach. As soon as he did that, he challenged Marc for 3 seasons in a row. So I just wonder how much that factors into the equation at that level.
Patrick McAllister makes a good point here. All data is shared. Alex is doing a fantastic job. It's not just his brother helping him. Marc is helping. Patrick, I 100% agree with you. If you go back to the first show with testing that we had, a couple of weeks ago, I cast a spotlight on Alex Marquez as one of the couple of riders that we kind of highlighted that need to show something a bit more. If I look at Alex Marquez, and a lot of the commentators went on about it over the weekend. A lot of journalists say that Alex is not worthy, and they forget he's won 2 world titles. And I understand that, but I've always been a critic of Alex Marquez because I've broken it down. Did he dominate that Moto3 year that he won the championship? No. It was a good fight, but he didn't dominate it. The Moto2 one, did he dominate? Was he the best rider? No, not really. Yes, he won the world titles. I agree. In MotoGP, and I didn't even know this, he hasn't won a main race yet.
Yeah.
2.5 seasons on a Ducati now. A full factory Repsol Honda rider. Yes, no, whatever was happening to the Honda. Full factory Honda rider in LCR when others have won on those packages. So for me, I think it's justified that Alex Marquez has this pressure on him purely because he's a 2-time
100%.
world champion. You came into MotoGP as a 2-time world champion. You've been there, 6-7 years now, and you haven't won a race yet. When the likes of Brad Binder on a KTM's won a race, we could pick up a whole bunch of other riders. So that is where my argument with Alex Marquez is. I'm not arguing that he's stepped his pace up now and he's showing great form and pace. That's completely surprised me. Absolutely. Can he do it for the whole season? Judging by this, there's no reason why he can't. But we have seen glimpses before, and he's not been able to carry it out at other certain places. And certainly when the chips are down and he can't find a setting, he's not one of those riders. And there's a lot of them in the field, Jack Miller and all those kind of guys. They're not able to fix a problem or find a solution or override a problem. They kind of then just settle for the 6th or 7th or 8th. And that's where Alex Marquez, to me, has had to pull his socks up. He's always going to be compared to his brother, Marc Marquez. It's always going to happen. Just like Darryn Binder will always be compared to Brad Binder. It's always going to happen because of their success. Alex has had his success, but that success is almost a detriment to him because that's why he's analyzed. If he wasn't a 2-time world champion, this would be amazing, and he wouldn't have the spotlight put on him by the likes of us and everyone else. It's the fact that you are a 2-time world champion and you've had red carpet treatment in many ways throughout your racing career. Rightfully so. Yes, he's a fast rider. Absolutely. Red carpet treatment into MotoGP, factory Repsol Honda rider, factory LCR rider, on a Ducati now that Marc Marquez won on last year, Enea Bastianini won on, Fabio Di Gianantonio won on. So why isn't Alex Marquez won on it? Okay, it's probably his bad luck that he's coming up against his brother on a full factory bike. But that's the only reason. It's not picking on Alex Marquez because, I almost felt the commentators screaming at me as one of those people, stop picking on Alex. And it's like, well, for me, it's justified all day long. He's got to start doing this. This is great that I'm seeing this, but Isn't it about time, 7 years later, with all the opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And let anybody go and listen to our podcast from, I'm going to say, the week after the first lot of testing this year. We said there are a couple of riders who this year have to step up to the plate. Alex Marquez was our first pick, both of us. Our next one was Frankie Morbidelli. So, we've got 2 out of 3. Jack Miller was disappointing, but that's Jack. I've always, had my say about him, not him personally, which people seem to think I don't like him as a person. I don't know him as a person. But, we said straight away, those 3, never mind the others, need to show, because out of the guys who are on the cusp of shouldn't be there, should be there, shouldn't, those to me are the 3 that need to, like you say, Alex, red carpet treatment. Predominantly, yes, he's a 2-time world champion, but he certainly rides on his brother's coattail. Absolutely no doubt, until this year. So I do think that they needed to show something. So we've had 2 races and they've both upped their game, him and Morbidelli. So yeah, definitely. One thing I'm going to say against Alex Marquez, this is highlighting how good that 2024 Ducati is, which Mark didn't ride last year, but Martin and Bagnaia did. It just shows how good that bike is. And it's not a discredit to Alex. Someone has to ride the bike fast. They're riding faster than they rode last year. So that shows he's improved, no doubt. But I'm just saying that 2024 package was probably, Mark's making the new bike, which is a 24.9, whatever, look good. But I think Alex is showing how great that bike last year, probably the best race bike that's ever done laps around a circuit.
Yeah, Cosmic Surf, I remember this comment where Mark's always said his brother is the actual better rider, but who has the better mentality and grit. And that's basically what it boils down to. I've looked at Brad and Darryn, and I've always seen Darryn as the more probably naturally talented rider. Brad had to work at it a bit more. And I'm not saying that, Brad has mentally been better than Darryn and made it work. It's just, those kind of things in this sport certainly do make a big difference. So, yeah, I agree with you, Cosmic Surfer. That's exactly what it is. Robert Swart is jumping ahead of us a little bit here, but I'll mention his comment while it's fresh up here, but we'll definitely talk about it. I think it's a good time for Brad to switch to Honda if possible. Paul's got his There it is. Paul's got his HR. You can see how Brad, you can see how Brad white it is, because you haven't been able to take it out for I think James did that for you last year, Silverstone.
Yeah, I did, Yeah.
So now you can finally wear it with pride. Now we're going to get a little bit dirty. Honda might just come good next year, or 27 with new rules, or even take Miguel's spot, Pramac. So, Robert, yes, we'll definitely jump into the KTM and Brad Binder situation a little bit later. I'm just going to quickly touch upon Frankie Morbidelli in between everyone that we've spoken about. On the podium in third, entertaining sprint race with the collision with Brad Binder. We'll quickly talk about that. I might get some punches through the screen here. Paul, I don't know what you felt, but for me, racing incident. I know kind of Brad came out and said it like that, whether he was being politically correct or not. But for me, it was the fact that it was Frankie Morbidelli got me riled up, because it was kind of like the law scope and everything that's gone on, and it's Frankie again. But I looked at it again and again and again, and it was just one of those typical racing incidents, that kind of corner that does that. If we cast our minds back to Darryn Binder and the Jake Dixon incident from Silverstone, very similar. You're in the corner, you're looking that way, I'm looking that way, and there's just a collision. And I think Simon Crafar on the team got that decision right, despite everyone going on Facebook and wanting Frankie's heart for supper.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brad dealt with it, which is all credit to Brad. And that's the mentality of a champion. Just move on. He's not whining about it. He's not throwing his toys out his cot. He did say he ran a bit wide. And on the cutback, Frankie can't see him. Frankie's leaning off the bike, dragging his helmet on the tar. Yes. And Brad did cut back in. So 50-50, a racing incident. And, that's what I like about, I'm going to say any South African. That's generalizing. But they deal with it there and then and move on. Don't whine about it for weeks down the line. But if that hadn't happened, Brad dealt with it. It's part of racing. You're going to get taken out and you're going to crash. It's part of racing. And he dealt with it and moved on. And I think all credit to him. Frankie, when I saw that, the first thing that jumped into my mind, lost scope. So that's every time he does something, that's all I think. But I think all credit to him. He showed on Sunday that, that's what we saw. What is it, 1,400? How many times did they tell us? Days since his last podium. But that was the Frankie that that got him into the teams that he's been in, because he's got the ability. We've said it. He needs to flick that switch, whatever it is, get back to the old Frankie and kind of look like, I mean, he took 5, 6, 7 corners to pass Pecco. It wasn't a bad, he passed him fair and square, but he didn't have respect, if that's the right word. He didn't say, hey, this is my mate, first of all, and he's going to be racing for the championship at the end of the year. I'll, hold back a bit. He saw the gap, he took the gap, and immediately pulled the gap. So, all credit to him. I think it was a very good weekend for him.
Lisa Esmond joins us, of course, mother to Bjorn and Ryan Esmond, who hopefully, if all goes well, next week, Tuesday evening, in the gap between the Kota round, we'll do a live chat with them, talk about their life in the paddock world. It's a great story, that, because Bjorn Esmond is obviously Brad Binder's right-hand man, and helping Darryn Binder as well, whereas Ryan Esmond, who works for Alpine Star, has been doing a lot of stuff for Jorge Martin, but is also now almost Pedro Acosta's right-hand man. So we've got 2 Esmonds in that KTM garage. So that'll be a great conversation. I'm hoping to make it work next week. Obviously, with them traveling and the time differences, it's been a bit of a headache to try and get going, but I'm hoping we can get them next week, Tuesday. So stay tuned to the channel. Hopefully you can make that happen. Brian Ritchie, hi everyone. Sorry for the lateness. Brian, that is 10 demerits for you. Go see the principal. And this is not the new school way of principal. This is the old
principal
school.
Has spoken.
Yeah, there's jacks. You're going to put your hand out and you're going to get walloped. There's none of this new modern day, don't hit the kids, we're going to blixem you for being late here now.
It's a good English word there, Rob.
Blixem. Loskop and blixem. We're teaching the world a bit of South African, that's for sure.
There we go.
Yeah, Frankie Morbidelli, I was impressed with him. He's got the swagger about him. There were a couple of moves and things that I saw with, he's definitely committed. A couple of the passes coming through the pack, he's definitely found this confidence about himself. And we always knew, if it didn't, then, hang up your leathers, because it's the perfect environment. VR46 Academy, Ucho, all the guys that he sees week in, week out, prepping your bike. They understand you, they love you, they cuddle you, they respect you, everything on a Ducati 2024 GP24, the greatest invention ever. So it's everything, all the pieces of the puzzle were finally there. As you said, he was one of the names that we said he's got to pull his finger and start getting results, and he did. Helped with the tire choice, and good on them for making that tire choice. Both him and DJ Antonio went the right way with that tire choice, because I think it did definitely give them a slight advantage. How they would have been on the medium rear, I don't know, but yeah, I was impressed with Frankie. It was a good ride. When he got ahead of Pecco, I kind of thought, you know what, Pecco's going to hunt you down and pass you. But when he maintained it there, especially with the rear tire that must have given him at the end of the race, he was saying there was a lot of movement in that to control it. It was great to see. And let's see how Frankie can, if he can carry this momentum into the rest of the season, in the rest of the races. I still have this little angel and devil on my shoulder. This devil just telling me, that's going to be Frankie's career for the rest of his MotoGP career. These odd highlight, races, but then there's going to be weekends where we're just going to see him fade and not really feature. I hope I'm wrong, but if there's any time to shine, just like Alex Marquez, it's now. While everyone else is fooling around, the KTMs, the Hondas getting better, which we'll talk about, the Yamahas, Pecco on a GP 24.9. Well, they are still fooling around trying to find their way. We're on GP 24s, loving life. We've got the settings, we've got the playbook. Off we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, in a couple of races' time, maybe in Qatar, we're going to have Martin back. And judging by the form of the Aprilia, I think he's going to be very competitive. So, that's another person to throw into the mix, that a guy like Frankie Morbidelli gets a good third place. Would it have been a fourth place if Martin was here? So that's why he needs to now step it up and make sure that it's a consistent week in, week out thing. And he's not going to win every week, and he's not going to finish third every week, but he can't have those anonymous weekends where he finishes 12th, 13th, 14th. That's just not what he needs. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. Obviously, this boosts his confidence. I think a big thing is, remember, he's part Brazilian and he's in South America. That definitely, you get that heritage. Yes, just like if Brad and Darryn raced a MotoGP round here, they'd be so pumped just to be, everything's familiar. You can go and order a burger and a Coke, and you can talk to the people and understand exactly what's going on. So I think that also played a bit of a part. I hope a very small part. That means that when he goes to America, he's not suddenly go back to Frankie of 2024, 3, 2, whatever the case might be.
Dirk Coetzee, Frankie's interview wasn't very inspiring. And I've kind of said this for a while now, that year that I spent in the paddock with Darryn, I went to a lot of the rider debriefs and that. And Frankie, it's very hard to judge him. He's almost kind of like that quiet little school kid in the class that sits at the back and just, minds his own business. He's not the most, forthcoming or approachable. He's approachable when you get to him. He smiles and, but he's never really been the most flamboyant kind of guy. I've always said it just sometimes doesn't look like he wants to even be there, or if he has the same love for racing as some of the other guys have, and that passion shines through. But that's just Frankie's personality. And you could see the difference by, celebrating his first podium in 1,414 days. Yeah. And it was almost very subdued compared to what it could have and should have been, especially given the situation in Argentina and everything. But that's just Frankie, and that's just how he is. So, we just got to deal with that. There's an interesting question here from another guy that's going to be sent to the principal office because he's late. AJ Fenta, South Africa's very own road racing superhero. How's it, Rob? I'm sorry if I'm intruding / late. Dom made me cook supper first. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Alan, we need to have words, my bud. We need to have words. But Dom, good on you. Actually, you know what? Alan can do something because Dom does every single thing else in that man's life. So AJ can do something. I just wanted to find out what your thought of Angel Piqueras' pass on the last lap for the lead. That front end save was phenomenal to see. He's definitely a contender this year. AJ, Paul, everyone in the comments. I mean, that was probably the first talking point that started the race weekend. Angel Piqueras is proving a phenomenal talent. He was on the Leopard Honda last year, did some great things. I think he's on a KTM now, which is the preferred package more consistently. He was super fast in testing. He's a phenomenal talent. As you said, that front end save. I was a little bit confused with the rule, and I kind of broke it down and I understood what happened with the rule. But, I always read the rule. And this is, again, where I think they should have a Simon, especially you've got a Simon Crayford now, who explains things so perfectly. Bring him at the end of a race weekend, and instead of doing this after the flag with these two guys that, shame, no disrespect to them, but, I don't want to watch them on TV and hear what they have to say, to be honest. Have a Simon Crayford sitting there and going, right, with the Angel Piqueras incident, this is what happened. When he touched the green, he then lost 2 positions, which he did. He went onto the green on the last lap, but then he did lose 2 positions, and then he made them up him going into the last chicane, which then is why he kept the win. Okay, from the outside we just saw, he's touched the green, that's it. He's the green. He must lose the position, so break that down for us. Break down the Frankie and Brad incident thing. This is why we didn't penalize it, because racing. So that's something I wish MotoGP would do more. But in terms of natural talent, AJ, 100%, I think the kids got it. I mean, Spain and is just churning them out left, right, and center, aren't they? But yeah, if I was another rider, I would be a little bit peeved with that, because, did he gain an advantage? No, not really. But the rule is, if you go on the green on the last lap, it shouldn't be whether you lose a position. Just don't touch the green on the last lap. Just make it that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're definitely simplifying it by saying that, Rob. These guys are on the limit. But I thought, so he ran wide onto the green and he got past. Does he not have to drop back a place after that? Because so then they got back on the racing line again. My interpretation would have been that he had to then drop a place and then make that place up. He didn't do that. Yes. So, yes, he got past, which was his error, and ran him onto the green. Then suddenly, because Adrian Fernandez, who finished second, definitely thought he had won the race. Yes. Not a big celebration, but he did, because he had seen that Piqueras had run onto the green, and he knew. So, a bit of a grey area. But what you're saying about Simon, that would make so much sense. And I've said it, I think, in the past. That's where Formula One, which I don't really watch, but they've got it right. Afterwards, they do a thorough, in-depth analysis, which I don't know why they don't do that for MotoGP. Maybe they do have a bigger audience, but they've got guys there saying, okay, this is why this happened. This is why that happened. Maybe we just need, as you say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of a Simon even if he does it, as no one asking him questions, he just like, I think you implying, sit down and say, okay, Piqueras, this is why I came to this decision, or I know he's the main note, but there's a panel. And this is why we came to this decision with Brad and Frankie. Then at least makes it more interesting for us and a bit more transparent, which is something that someone mentioned, and I think who it was, that they could go to race direction and talk to Simon, where it seemed like with Freddie Spencer, there was no negotiation, so it seems like already the riders are way happier with the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll touch upon DJ Antonio. Nothing really to say there. That's just an exercise that's just going to get better and better and better with his injury, recovering from that, and that another great ride there from him in fifth place. Let's jump onto the Hondas, because a really good, the best weekend for Honda as a company in MotoGP for years and years and years. And I say that because they had 3 Hondas inside the top 10. We'll touch upon how that happened with Ayagura straight after this, before we get into the KTM saga. Zarco, though, looked fantastic. It was a track that he loved from the Friday first session. He was on it, looking more and more comfortable on that bike. I did see in the race, though, especially when DJ Antonio attacked him, there's still those limitations where, he's having to be hesitant, especially at the end of the race there. He couldn't just defend or attack the way he wanted to. He kind of had to. He was just a victim. He's like, okay, well, I can't compete against you now. That's still where the Honda was lacking. But in the overall weekend, where you've got Zarco qualifying on the front row, consistently fast, back-to-back with Thailand now, Joan Mir finishing a race in 9th place, and Luca Marini in 10th place. As you said at the start, before we came live on air, probably got more points in this one race than he did the whole of last season. Honda will be looking at that going, you know what? This is the progress that we wanted to make. And with the Marini in 10th, at the pace that Mark and Alex were sitting at the front of the race, which is almost lap record, and, everywhere we go is faster. Marini in 10th place, 16 seconds behind in a demanding 23 or 24 lap race. That's just over half a second a lap, essentially, you're losing. That's really good going for Honda.
Yeah, absolutely. So they've certainly, at the moment, made the most improvements from 2024 to this year. But a very interesting thing, and I've told you, I listened to that Oxley Bomb podcast, and I recommend anybody who's a fan of MotoGP, listen to them. And that's what that Peter Baum said. He said what he understands is, having Albessiani there now, Honda have always had millions and millions of new things to try. Albessiani is now showing them the way, which he did with Aprilia, of how to take all those, put them on the bike and make it work. There's no point in having things that you're not sure which way to go. He seems to be the one that knows the quick fixes, is what he called it, but get the right parts on the bike for the right track and make them work. So possibly, and they also very adamant that Honda need to have a base in Europe for manufacture. Right now, they're still doing everything in Japan. Yamaha have got a manufacturing base in Italy, so they sorted. He's very adamant, but he says definitely the changes they've made, first time ever Honda have had a team manager running the show who's not or for a long time, who's not a Japanese person. So he seems to think that the difference is that Honda have always had the ability and the parts. They've just never known what to bolt onto the bike. That's a very simplified way of saying it. But that seems to be his feeling. And he thinks if that's the way it is going, Honda are just going to get better and better. Doesn't mean they're going to be challenging Ducati for wins in 3 weeks' time. But certainly from the last 2 years where they were stone last as the manufacturer in the championship, and as we've discussed last year, if you wanted to see where the Hondas were, just look at the last 3 or 4 bikes on the grid. There's definitely been a massive jump up, and they've certainly got the gap, especially Zarco, who's definitely a hard guy. He'll race. He goes to every race thinking he's going to win. He's got that gap now down to sort of 0.3 of a second, which is, that's from where they were to where they are. Certainly, it's fantastic to see.
Yeah, as Estienne van der Berg and Wayne Taylor comment on here, at the moment it is the actual top line speed of that Honda that's probably their biggest handicap. But, it's very much a case of, one step back, two steps forward. I think engine management, from what I picked apart in the last couple of years at the races that I did go to in the riders debrief, which is, it was just such an inconsistent thing. You would crack the throttle on nothing, then all of a sudden there's something. And so they just didn't have the smooth engine power delivery, So in a way, as you said, this guy's come along and said, let's use this, let's tone it down. It's 300 horsepower at the end of the day. Let's tone it down. Let's figure things out first, why this is happening. And then we can build a base on that. And it definitely seen, Paul, we said it at the end of last year about Honda and Yamaha. You just need more of a plan. And they've done that. Alicia Spargo coming in, Takanaka Gomi being that middleman between Japan and Europe, Albasani or whatever you want to call him, coming from Aprilia, all those pieces of the puzzle are just starting to. A lot less of Alberto Puig, which I think is a great thing. He just seems to be sitting in the background now, making sure the stickers are on the bikes and this is packed nicely. Not that face of Honda anymore, which I think is a good thing. And they're just getting on with the job. And as you said, simplifying things, and that's something that as we move on to the KTM project, I think is still the biggest problem. And hearing what the commentators and a lot of people inside the paddock are still saying is that seems to be their biggest downfall still, is that KTM's doing this up and down, new part here, new part left, right, and center. Whereas coming out of testing, KTM still weren't sure what sticker was going to go there, and this was going to go there, and this was going to go there. Whereas Ducati very quickly made the decision, we're going this way. Honda seemed to have done the same thing, we're going this way. You remember when Marc was a couple of years ago now, Marc was at Honda. At one stage, they had 4 different bikes for Marc to go try. One with no wings, one with it, and it's like, how do you control that? How do you manage that at this level? And how do you make progress from that in an environment where you don't have any time? And I think Honda are going about it in the right way, and the results are there. Zarco, 7.4 seconds off the lightning, faster than ever Marc Marquez on a factory Ducati. That's really a big coup for Honda and Zarco to take. Behind them, we've got the pair of Binder and Pedro Acosta, just ahead of Jean Mir and Luca Marini. And as Wayne Taylor said, if there was a little bit more horsepower there, could have been a lot more trouble there for them, because Jean Mir was right on the back end of Pedro Acosta. Brad had a little bit more room there, although he was under pressure from Ayagura, who we'll mention just now. But let's talk about this giant elephant that just seems to be in the room every time we come on, we do the show, and that is Brad Binder and the whole KTM project. I'm going to bring up this comment here from Brett Lawson because it kind of touches upon it. It's honestly sad watching a talent like Pedro just fading into the background, and Ayagura is showing him up week after week. Do you think Pedro Acosta is going to give KTM the time to become a competitive like Brad has, or like some reports have said he's going to VR46? So, Paul, take away the everything going on with KTM, and like I said, from the outside, and this is just us saying it, but a lot of people are saying it, is, KTM doing this and this and this and this, instead of just trying to work with a base and trying to tweak it and find something. Balance was a big word that Akiayo and Brad mentioned this weekend, trying to find more of a balance. I was glad that was one positive I took, and it seemed to make a little bit of a difference with Brad, but still, I know even on Facebook and everyone, 7th is a fantastic result for Brad in the current situation, but it's actually a terrible result for Brad, if you know what I mean. It's still frustrating seeing the DGs, the Alex Marquezes, those kind of guys ahead of him. Same with exactly like what Brett's saying about Pedro Acosta. These are better riders that are just on the wrong machine. But the biggest frustrating thing for me, for KTM now, is you're going into a race weekend, and they after one round, Anaya Bastianini looking for an out, might get himself out of his contract and might go elsewhere and find a Grassini bike and beg them to take him. Okay, Maverick Vinales seems okay-ish for now, but he's not doing anything. Brad's showing his loyalty, and I think he's going to stick out, despite what we all think and hope. I think Brad's going to stick out his contract till the end of 2026, and maybe even there. Brad's just so stubborn and determined to be the man that makes this work. That's the frustrating part of being a Brad fan. But then you've also got this Pedro Acosta news coming out that, there's already potentially a deal with VR46 if things don't improve. And I watched Pedro Acosta, and exactly like Brett was saying, I saw a deflated rider there. I didn't see a vibrant Pedro. I didn't see I saw Pedro leaving it out on the track, like putting in a fast low 37 lap time, but it was always going to come to the race and battle. And, this is a kid launching his MotoGP career and did a great job last year, but still looking for his first win, and he's not getting the opportunity to really show his true worth. And all the commentators on whatever channel that I watched over the weekend, TNT, MotoGP, everyone had the same thing. It just looks like a Brad and certainly a Pedro are riding around and being handicapped, not being able to show their true potential. All that cloud above them, and the fact that you had Bastianini and Viñales qualifying last and second last. Okay, take Savadori out of it.
Yeah,
it's just such a gloom picture.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's certainly. And we said week after week, Brad says, "Okay, we found something." And then they go, "Okay, he had a great qualifying. He was P5, went straight into Q2." So we were all very positive that, okay, now they've found something. But then it comes to the race, and it just seems like they haven't found what they need to have found. So, we've discussed this every single week. It's almost, put it on repeat, put it on repeat, put it on repeat. But the big change is the attitude of Pedro Acosta. Now, we felt that he's maybe possibly most weekends a bit faster than Brad, and he's going to encourage is not the right word, but he's going to help Brad to up his game, which happens, and that's what a fast teammate is all about. And suddenly we saw this weekend where he seemed deflated, and Brad was Brad. What you get from Brad on a Sunday, he goes there and he's going to give you 110%. Where Pedro just seems like he's, okay, I'm going to give you 100%. Above that, I'm not doing it, because we saw last weekend or 2 weekends ago, he fell over. Last year, how many times did he crash? As soon as he pulled the gap on Brad, yes, we understand that, but he's riding 5% over the limit that Brad was prepared to ride at. Now he's settled down and said, I'm not the rookie anymore. I've got nothing to prove. This bike's not giving me what I want. That's where I'm prepared to put it on the line, which means he's deflated. It's round 2. That's the worrying thing. Brad, you don't have to question his commitment, not for 1 second. Rightfully or wrongfully, I don't know. And I've always admired Brad for his commitment and his level of, we're going to make this project work attitude to KTM. But I think now looking, and as you said, we'll chat about Iagura. Iagura is an option. That team, Bomrel Fernandez, it's an American team. Bob Moore, Brad's manager, as James Dent mentioned, is an American. Come on, guys. Go to the boardroom and have a beer, do whatever you do. Honda suddenly looks like it could become an option. Look, it's also very early. It's a track Zarco's very good at. Let's give it. And Kota, we've seen Alex Rins one on the Honda there, so I'm expecting good things. But with Brad, you get 110% full commitment all the time, regardless of what happened last week. Pedro, I think he's got to that point where, okay, well, let's see if we can get a Ducati for next year, and we'll write this year off. Correct. And you've said it with Quartararo. We both agreed on it with Viñales. When that mindset changes, and if it's happened to him in round 2 already, never mind Bastianini and Viñales, I would have expected nothing less from Viñales. Bastianini, possibly the disappointment of the weekend, but this is a big worry for KTM if that's what's going through Pedro Acosta's head right now. We don't know that, but certainly that would be anyone who's followed this sport and knows a bit about it. That would be their thinking right now.
Wesley 290 makes a comment. The KTM still running a carbon frame that no one else uses, and it seems to have a bad traction, chattering, and bad tire wear. Time to switch to aluminium. They have it on the new 990 RCR. Wesley makes a good point. When they introduced that carbon chassis last year, was it Sabang, or the year before? And they got a good result straight away. I remember, I think they qualified, or Jack qualified well, and Brad finished on the podium, and we were like, right, this is going to be the answer. It hasn't been the answer. Jack's comment still of, it's so nice going into a corner knowing I'm not going to lose my teeth. It's funny, but you look at it and you go, are we really still there in this modern day and age? And the TNT crew, Neil Hodgson and Gavin Emmett, and I've said this a couple of times, if you just look at the bikes, just to the naked eye, was it Now Motor News or someone also on Facebook posted a picture of that KTM of Bastianini. I mean, there's just aero coming everywhere. There's just things coming out of that thing everywhere. Formula One, they had Red Bull Formula One aero technicians come in. Okay, but this is MotoGP, buds.
Yeah.
Ducati haven't had a Formula One expert come in and do it. They've kind of used the principles of motorcycles or whatever Ducati have done. They've done it right. This is not helping. This putting a giant, checker 60/60 delivery box on the back with something in it and a balancing weight and this and that. The bike just, again, that word balance. I look at that bike and I go, God, there's nothing there. I watch Brad ride and he's still having to just, that leg's coming out now. And he, as you said, he's giving his all. But as soon as you get to mid corner, you wait for that bike. He's almost a chicane. He's like a roadblock, those KTMs in that mid corner. You can be as strong as you want on the brakes. That's lekker. That means nothing, So it is. It's very frustrating. Again, on the Pedro Acosta and Brad, this kind of falls into the whole KTM saga at the moment. Watching the Rossi documentary that I was watching earlier today, I don't want to say wasted 2 years, but Rossi lost 2 years of his life on a Ducati that they just couldn't get right. Ducati, the mighty Ducati that we are seeing today, could not get it right with the mighty Valentino Rossi that made a Honda work, made a Yamaha that no one else could get work. Jeremy Burgess, that combination, carbon chassis, all these kind of fancy things. And if there's a lot of comparisons to what was going on there, Ducati throwing the kitchen sink at it, try this. But at the end of the day, he lost 2 years. Is a Pedro Acosta and his manager sitting there going, listen, bud, anything could happen at the next race. You could really seriously hurt yourself trying to make this KTM work before your MotoGP career has even begun. It's over. Let's have these conversations. VR46 are very interested. Morbidelli's on a 1-year deal. DJ Antonio, there's options there. There's options. So let's, but again, as you said, it's round 2 only. That's already in this kid's mind. I saw Pedro Acosta riding there around there on that Sunday race. Exactly what you said. I'll give you 100%, but I'm not crashing again. I'm not scratching my Alpine Star leathers and my helmet again for this. It's not worth me, eating dust for this. If this is how the bike feels, this is how the bike feels. I must eat humble pie and watch these guys that I know I can beat. Same with Brad. I know we can beat these guys. We can't beat them, but how much longer do you take that? And when I watched that again today with that Rossi Ducati comparison, it kind of made me think of this. Okay, right, guys, how much longer? If Bastianini is already talking about it after round 1, we saw Zarco do it years ago. And it was the best thing for his career because he got a factory Ducati ride out of it. And how much more patience are these guys going to have? And as I cast my mind back to Thailand, when Neil Hodgson said, how much longer do the guys paying the bills, a la Red Bull and whoever, how much longer are they going to wait? Yes, we can put on Facebook all we like. 7th place, Brad, making the best out of a bad situation. Again, brilliant. 7th place is not a brilliant position for Brad. In the current situation, absolutely. Because Viñales and Bastianini, the mighty Viñales and Bastianini, can't get within. They would pay you for that 7th place finish. They can't get anywhere near it. But, it's not good enough. Pedro Acosta 8. It's not good enough. It's not.
Yeah. The worrying factor is Pedro Acosta. Brad, you get, as we've said, 110% commitment all the time, and his loyalty is to KTM. He's shown that because he's stuck with them from I think is his 10th season, 9th season with Red Bull KTM. So he's shown them the loyalty, and he gives them 100%. Enea Bastianini had no option. He got offered this ride. He was out at Ducati. He took the ride not knowing what to expect. Pedro Acosta knew exactly what he was getting. Yeah, maybe he personally was hoping for a jump from 2024 to 25 of half a second a lap, which he didn't get. But he also knew when did the news first break? July of last year, the financial woes of KTM. So me personally, I think he's let the side down because he's ridden the bike. He knew exactly what the ins and outs of KTM were. Surely the management talked to these guys and say, listen, here's our financial crisis, but this is how we're dealing with it. So as I say, Bastianini, and I don't even mention Viñales, but the two of them had no options. So they came onto a bike, never having ridden it, not knowing whether they're going to suit it or not. So I'm giving them a little bit of grace, and Bastianini specifically. He got off the best bike and got onto the KTM. Pedro, something doesn't sit right with me that he knew exactly what was going on. Brad knew. Brad hasn't said, we've only got 20 more races, then the year's done and we'll try again next year. Brad is 100%. He goes to the race with the same mentality as Johann Zarco. I'm going there to try and win this race. That's it. Pedro, and I mean, we criticizing the guy. It's 2 races in, but he's definitely not doing what he was doing last year. 100% not.
And as a lot of people said, it's a shame because there's a massive talent there. And there's no reason why he shouldn't be competing. In an ideal world, it would be fantastic to see all these guys on GP24s and may the best man win. That's the ideal world of racing that I would like to see. It's not going to happen, obviously, and it would be nice to see other manufacturers being competitive in that point. But and I think when a lot of people say MotoGP is getting boring and stuff, it is down to the fact purely that Ducati and Marc are just so good. But it's actually just more down to the fact that the others aren't as good as they should be. KTM aren't making any kind of impression. As you said now, Honda can look at that weekend and take so much positive out of it. Brad and Pedro should not be battling with a Joan Mir and a Luca Marini not too far behind them. They should not be battling with an Ayagura on the Trackhouse Aprilia in his second MotoGP race ever. It shouldn't be happening. So, I think there's a lot of thinking for the Costas camp to do. Loyalty is a great thing. Money is a great thing. I think Bastianini and Vignales also climbed on the gravy train there. As you said, I don't think there were many other options, but hey, Red Bull money is fantastic. Despite what's happening with KTM in general, the Red Bull money is still in the motorsport side. But I mean, Bastianini and Vignales at the back of the grid, and Neil Hodgson still said in the TNT broadcast when he was walking off the grid, and he had to kind of blink 100 times it's Bastianini and Vignales, on this Tech 3 KTM that Pedro Acosta was front 2 rows on last season, So they've gone backwards. There's no other way to put it. They've gone backwards. They're lucky the likes of Quartararo kind of got knocked off and didn't have a good ride. Bezzecchi, would have been another player in the mix.
Yeah.
When Jorge Martin comes back, is going to be another bike to beat. So now you're 8th, 9th, 10th in reality where the bike actually is, and you're going, God, listen, the fact that Brad makes the best out of these weekends is great, but I couldn't help but sit there, doing, my brother does the posts for Motor Rider World Facebook, but wanting to do a positive post for Brad because there was positive to take out of it, breaking it down that the bike doesn't deserve to be there, but also going, I don't want to be, excited about Brad finishing 7th. And in Thailand, I'm tired of this now. We've had 3 years of this going. Brad's making the best out of a bad situation.
Not to hop on the demise of the KTM, but I watched the MotoGP race with James Dent. And the first thing he said to me when they showed that aerial photograph, check the back of the grid now. It's all orange. It used to be all red, or the Honda colors of Indomitsu and LCR. Now the last 2 bikes were orange. So, it's a sad state of affairs. How much the financial woes are, we know that's part of the problem because they didn't develop over that time frame from the last race of last year, that test day, till the beginning of this test year, which, in MotoGP, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of doing nothing when everyone else is doing something. Now you're seeing the fruits of it with Honda, Yamaha to a point, and what's the opposite of the fruits of it? The detriment to KTM. And it can't continue like this, Rob. It just cannot. As you say, at some point, someone's going to say, okay, boys, 10 years in the championship, we've had 7 wins in total. We pull in the plug. Is it going to get to that? We sincerely hope not, but something's going to have to change, and we keep saying this, just on repeat. I don't know. Our opinion, which is in no way is right, but the chassis and the suspension. Come on, guys. If you're that desperate, surely now's the time to say, well, we've got nothing to lose. Surely.
You're not going to lose sales in WP suspension if you're not running it on your MotoGP bike.
100%.
I don't think it's going to make any difference in the outside world. So, Vinolan Pillay, I hope I'm saying that right, Vinolan. Is it possible to change concession status during the season? Because obviously that's also played a part in Honda's resurgence, Yamaha to a point. My problem with that is even if KTM do, I don't think they would make much out of it. I think they've had more than enough time to get this right. It's exactly like what we said with Honda, and that it's what you do with that time. And I don't think KTM are doing the right things with that time. If you're still going into these race weekends talking about this word balance, God, I've heard it for 3 years now, talking about balance. If you haven't found it after 3 years, and it's so I don't know, someone more knowledgeable, or Paul, you might know.
Possibly, Rob. The advantage is if they get concessions, and depending what they are, remember the concessions are tiered. But let's just say they get the same concessions that Honda and Yamaha can run at the moment. They can then use more tires in their testing. They can also have, I think, 3 additional test days, weekends, than the Ducatis and the Aprilias, and their MotoGP riders. So not only do they have Pol Espargaro and Danny, if he's still involved, they can then send Brad and Pedro to be there. So it would certainly benefit them, because then where they've been trying to sort this out on a Friday morning race weekend, okay, you try this, you try this, you try this. Now they can do that if the concessions came into being. Then they'd be able to say, okay, we're just taking Brad and Pedro, for example, and we're going to go and test if they've got 2 days and we've got enough tires, because that's also a restriction with testing. What I'll do is for our next show after Kota, I'll just check up on, can those concessions change? Because I know they're tiered, but I can't remember what the criteria is. The problem is Pedro Acosta and Brad, but more Pedro, they got 7 podiums last year. So they one of the concessions is you can't have got a podium, and they got 7. So I think that throws them a little bit in the deep end. Maybe this year, I don't know if there's a thing that says, okay, if by half year you've got no podiums, we'll start adding concessions. But maybe it means this year no concessions, but possibly 2026. But certainly that would be a big advantage to them.
Alex van der Bergs, looks like Acosta wasn't bothered with saving his tires. Brad looks like he made that riding style change to preserve the rear tire. Even with Darryn, I see both Brad and Darryn still looks a bit uncomfortable because we're not used to it, but with this leg out style now. So the guys really are doing whatever they can to change. Getting back to the concessions, someone made a comment here about, at what point do Honda, is it possible to change concession status? Oh, no, sorry, not that one. God, where is it now? Something about, there. So when does Honda lose concessions and when does KTM get them? Smiley fate from Robert Swart. So, I mean, Honda, to lose your concessions, you've got to win a race or be on the podium 3 races in a row or something.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay, so
then they'll lose their concessions. Yes. But I'm not sure what the converse is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'll sort that out. Next time we chat, I'll have answers.
Yeah, you've got some homework. Otherwise, you're in the principal's office.
I'll get jacks.
Yeah, please. But again, my only concern with that is, even if you've got a Brad and a Pedro there, it's what you're doing with that time. If you're throwing parts at it, and I don't know. It's just the fact that it's not. Again, watching the TNT broadcast and Gavin Emmett, who's been in MotoGP, I mean, he was commentating on 500 cc's. Neil Hodgson is a World Superbike champion race MotoGP. And there's other people saying the same thing about this KTM just going up, down, left, right, and center. I think Akioyo, it can't just change overnight, but he's going to have to just do this Honda and go, that's it, boys. Forget this. What we have here is what we have here. And I do think, if you were serious about making this, and I'm not saying they're not serious, but if you are seriously, you want that KTM badge to go and win and compete in MotoGP. You buy a set of Öhlins, you put them in Danny Pedrosa's bike or Pol Espargaro's bike, and you test back to back. Whatever test you do, you've got one bike set up on WP and you've got one set up with Öhlins. Where's the harm in doing that exercise? And if the Öhlins comes out better, and same with the chassis. Carbon chassis, aluminium chassis, or be it whatever. It's got to that point now where it's time for those drastic changes. Otherwise, you're going to play out the same play for the next God knows how many years. You're going to lose sponsors. They're going to pull out. You're going to lose riders. You're going to have no one wanting to climb on this bike. I think it was Olimoto. Someone said, if Brad and Pedro want to leave, there's another Spanish youngster that'll come and take his place. I think David Alonso in Moto2, okay, it's been a slow start in Moto2, but we all know the talent that's there. I think a lot of the riders in Moto2 and Moto3 are going, I don't want that KTM.
Yeah.
It's ruining careers. That's what it's doing. Pedro Acosta, I'm not a Pedro Acosta. Pedro Acosta will whip me all day. Now I must climb on a bike that he finishes 8th on or crashes. No, thank you. I want to do a Jorge Martin and say, bye-bye, Red Bull KTM. You can keep your money and whatever. I'm going with a satellite Ducati, and in 4 years' time, I'll be a world champion.
Yeah.
And this is what's playing out right in front of our eyes. So, yeah, I think the big changes need to happen sooner rather than later for KTM. So let's see what happens. Oli Moto has just sent me a picture on Messenger, and he says, I fixed Paul's wall for him. And he's photoshopped a Rossi picture and a Rossi cap. The Martin. I don't know if you can see it there.
Oli Moto, I'm going to have to send you to the principal's office.
I'm going to download this and send this to you, Paul. Some people have too much time in their lives. Oli Moto's got too much time in his life to do that. Oh, where were we now? No, lost my. Ayagura. Let's talk about Ayagura quickly. Another great weekend for him as a rookie. Didn't have the same kind of qualifying or the same kind of impact as he did in Thailand. But again, wasn't crashing left, right, and center. Was kind of doing the mature thing. Looked like he had good race pace. Finished just behind Brad, but still ahead of the likes of Mir, Acosta, Marini, some big hitters. Viñales, Bastianini, Jack Miller, Quartararo, Alex Rins. So for a rookie, it was good. Pity about the disqualification, because all we see on the outside is that Ayagura was disqualified, when in reality, listen, Trackhouse, that was and Aprilia. That's silly. How does that happen?
Rob, well, I've scoured the internet to find more than Davide Brivio saying, "Oh man, we're so disappointed."
Yeah.
Someone needs to be accountable. Was it Brivio? Did he authorize it? How do they get the wrong? It's a stock ECU. It's a MotoGP issued ECU. How do they get the wrong? And I don't understand the difference between firmware and this and that, but the firmware software on their ECU unit was wrong. How does that happen when it's a stock thing? What you straight away start thinking is someone was trying to doctor this thing. There's no doubt. That's which is tantamount to cheating. If it was a criminally serious offense, that's the wrong word. Would they not have banned the team for 3 races? I don't know. Like if you take drugs in sport, you get a sanction of 1 month if you're very lucky, but generally 1 or 2 years. So it must have been a very minor infringement, I think, to just cancel their points, disqualifying, that's the word. But I want to know what actually happened there, because that doesn't just happen. And nobody's saying nada. So, and they're being has the electronics engineer been fired? Has Davide Brivio been wrapped over the knuckles? Just a very, very disappointing thing. Did Ayagura know what was going on, or did he climb on the bike from Saturday's qualifying to Sunday morning warm-up and say, yes, see, something feels good here? Yeah. What have they done? Oh, no, don't worry, we just changed the setting. I don't know. Just smacks of not a little bit underhand to me, which, there's never been issues like this. I don't know and maybe I'm just thinking, I'm overthinking it. I don't know. I just cannot believe that it was someone just made a mistake. Sorry, let's move on to Kota. We're not in a grade 2 soccer match here. This is the big boys playing. And I understand they're all trying to find a 10th of a second here and there, but if it does sniff a little bit of underhandedness, we'll cut it out straight away, because that's not the spirit of MotoGP.
Well, as you said, it kind of is on the same level as an Iannone taking a banned substance and getting 4 years, so their rider gets 4 years. This, as you said, it's a plug and play device. You put it in, you plug it in, that you don't touch it, off you go. Yeah. Someone's internally gone in there on purpose and hacked this thing, and it's definitely being swept under the rug. This is another thing that I think a Simon Crayford or a technical guy should come out afterwards and put the mic in front of him. Tell us about the situation, because we need to know more. We from the outside paying the money to live stream your racing and do all this. We as fans deserve the right to know a bit more about it. So, very interesting. Pierre Diesel, whichever you want to say. Rob, maybe a stupid question, but please explain to me, why do the guys put their legs out, please? Alex van der Berg has kind of answered it perfectly. And now, Pierre, by extending the leg, riders can shift their weight and center of gravity forward and inward, which can help stabilize the bike during heavy braking and corner entry. Also, a form of air brake. So, it's a rider aero, put it that way. I'll be honest. I've always put my hand up and said it's a knee-jerk reaction for the speeds that they're going when you brake that hard with those brakes and those carbon brakes, and it's a holy shit moment, and it's just a natural reaction to put your legs out. But I do think, as Alex said, I do think it has over the years, just been perfected into an art, and I think that's what Brad and Darryn certainly are trying to do, because everyone seems to do it now, and Brad and Darryn have been one of the few riders that haven't. If I look back at the likes of Jorge Lorenzo, he was a rider that never used to do it, multiple-time world champion, one of the smoothest riders ever to grace MotoGP, but towards the end of his career, when this really started taking effect with aero and everything, does it make more of a difference? Clearly it does if the riders are trying something. Paul, one thing I will quickly that I did want to mention, and I haven't brought into the KTM conversation with Brad, is one thing that did, again, fanboy cap on, MotoGP fanboy. I watched Brad follow, was it Pecco in that free practice one to get him into Q2, and he went from 38.2, 38.2, 38.1 to a 37.4 or something, straight into Q2 following. Great, awesome, okay, nice. Then come hell or high water, Brad's fastest time in Q2 then was a 37.7 by himself, so he clearly didn't have the pace to do it by himself. I cast my mind back. First of all, the frustrating thing is, like, Brad, just tag someone every single session. Just put your pride away and just tag everyone. That's where we are at the moment. Marc Marquez put it out in the public and said, that's where I am right now. I've got a tag to get fast. If that's what's going to get you into Q2 and potentially a top 6 qualifying, hey, Brad, I'm not going to judge you. Just do it. The other point that is interesting is, I remember when Marc was doing that on the Honda, and Simon Crafar broke it down and said, when I speak to Marc, he said the bike just handles a lot better when there's a bike in front of him, creating, there's no distortion. It's just creating that kind of smooth airflow, which leads me to believe, and this is the clever mind that Simon Crafar, which leads me to believe that your aero is wrong, that if in clean air, your bike performs better. And that's what Marc had to do. So again, now I'm translating this going, okay, Pedro in his Q2 session was also tagging Pecco, and I think he did a 37.4, which was his fastest qualifying time. I look at that and go, well, there's a clear indication of how this bike, if you line those kind of things up, and if you take into consideration that, just kind of, again, spilling the beans on what's actually wrong there, that the aero's just not doing its job in the right way.
And exactly the opposite has happened with Honda, where they've now got a bike that Zarco could do the lap times on his own. As you say, 3 years ago, Marc Marquez couldn't do it. And he was saying he needed clean air. Now, that must mean that surely someone at KTM says, okay, let's start taking bits off and get this bike to work more like a motorcycle than like if we're going to say a F1 car or a fighter jet or whatever the case might be. And then let's build up. But we've discussed it, Rob. You've got Friday morning to get sorted, and Friday afternoon, you're going to be putting in the best laps to get through to Q2. So the story of testing on a race weekend is backfiring on them, if that's the case, in another way. So such a difficult one. But I think Honda seem to have found the right thing, and their bike certainly doesn't look, it's got the wider belly pan in the front, just sort of a third of the way up the fairing, but it certainly doesn't look like the KTM from the end of where the tank is going backwards. Looks more like a Ducati than KTM. So possibly. Just one thing you mentioned about the leg dragging. Someone asked a question. Alex Marquez does not do it. Just as a point of interest, he keeps both feet on the foot peg all the time. Just so different things suit different riders. And I think if you haven't got used to it by now, like Brad, he's still, I want to say it doesn't come as naturally as a Marc Marquez or a Bagnaia. Has always been. Martin was world champion. He could almost stick his leg out horizontally. So, just a point of interest. I noticed Alex doesn't do it at all.
A couple of people making really good comments about it to explain it more there. So thank you, Robin Kenwood, and then the rest of you guys for answering the questions. There was a comment here regarding the ECU from Chris D. Apparently an outdated version of the software running in the ECU. But again, I don't know how that happens, because that ECU is pre-programmed and given to you and kind of locked. You're not allowed entering that ECU. So
Yeah.
That's a corporate excuse for me. On the topic of the suspension, Öhlins versus WP for KTM. On the shock issue, this is from Little Big Media Co. MotoGP Öhlins aren't off the shelf items, and KTM owning WP. Öhlins won't want to just give them their latest and greatest and lose the IP. Makes a fair comment. I know a lot of the teams, you basically lease those Öhlins forks. You don't own them. You put them in your bike for the year. End of the year, you either give them back or you sell the bike and pay them or whatever. But I could understand what Little Big Media Co is saying. There's, Öhlins will look at this and go, there's not a chance we're giving you our set of forks. You're going to pull it apart and just try and make it into your WP. So, yeah, makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah, there would certainly be contract obligations. Your example, which is, an example, give them a set, let them set. That would never happen. We understand that. But certainly, because as we mentioned, Honda have their own suspension company, Yamaha do. Öhlins have got a contract with them. They're not worried about it. I can't believe Honda are taking Öhlins internals and putting them on a Fireblade. Yeah, they might benefit them through some technology with Showa, but I still think the biggest downfall for KTM is that fact that, and it's not going to happen during the year. I can't see it happening. But what they should be doing is say, end of this year, sorry, WP, we're done with you. We're going to take a season on Öhlins and see the difference. If it doesn't work, we'll wangle away out of the contract or we'll run it for a year. But they haven't done that. And, until they do that, I think they ain't going to get to where they need to be.
You got more to gain than to lose. So,
100%.
Yeah, let's see. Wayne Taylor. I can't see how following a rider will give you the edge grip on the exit of the corner. That's KTM's biggest issue right now. Wayne, I agree, but in a way, with my very limited technical aspect, but I just looked at it from a racing point of view. If the front's not as loaded, the balance of the bike is a bit better. Marc Marquez had the same thing. He, on the Honda, he just had lacked rear grip. KTM's biggest issue is rear grip and chattering. There's no doubt about that. I just think, it was clear. Brad follows Pecco. He does a 37.3 or 4. Gets straight into Q2. Doesn't come anywhere near that time on his own. So clearly the bike behaves a little bit better or something. Yeah, you get the benefit of having it's a carrot. Yes, I understand that. But then why can't you push that bike to that by yourself then?
Or in the race when you're behind someone.
Or in the race when you're behind someone else. So I looked at Marc. Marc was the prime example of how it worked. He had to do it. Marc put himself from 11th, 12th, nowhere in the weekend to 3rd on the grid, or 2nd on the grid, or 1st on the grid, from tagging someone, and blatantly tagging someone, still wanting to pay Jack Miller. It works. It somehow works. And at this level, we've said it so many times, MotoGP is at that point now where every single little millimeter and tweak and a little bit of air, everything can make such a big difference. And for me, it was there to see. Could he have been using a different line that he would otherwise? Christine, listen, absolutely. That's another benefit of following. You find little tricks of, and it's still something I can still see Brad trying to work out, but he's stubborn, riding style and brain is still not letting him do it as frequently as he should, but making the track shorter. If you look like that long, beautiful left, as you said, where they were smoking it, you look at how much tighter the Ducatis could keep that to line up the next right, whereas Brad was like forced out, having to make a huge long right of that. There were a couple of occasions, even where Pedro was making more of a corner than he actually wanted to, and I think that is down to the stubbornness of the KTM, and that's probably that is where Bastianini is battling the most with. I want the bike in the corner there, and it just refuses to go there. The braking, Bastianini and Vinales will tell you, under braking, it's the greatest invention ever. Brad proved it again by holding Iagura off Fandigi for a while. You can't outbrake the guy. It's impossible to outbrake. But mid-corner, that thing just comes to a dead standstill, chatters their teeth off, and then you get on the gas, and everything translates to the rear, and then it spins up, and again, just that balance, and there's a massive it's just a massive disconnect that they need to sort out. A nice explanation here in terms of the firmware there from Alex van der Berg. Teams were asked to test a better version of the firmware in preseason. Agura's crash destroyed the ECU, so when they built the bike, they took a unit from one of the testing bikes, which still had that version uploaded on it. The maps themselves were built for the correct firmware version, so I had no benefit from it. That's the frustrating part, is that I didn't benefit from it, but he got penalized for it. And I understand what you're saying there is, okay, well, just take it from that bike and put it in. But surely, before any bike leaves that pit and goes onto the track, some MotoGP ECU Magneti Morelli tech goes, plugs in each and every bike and makes sure that ECU has that firmware in. Why do it after the race? Just do it before the race. Or on the grid even. You're on the grid for 20 minutes. Plug it in. Cool. His map's right. So, yeah, I can understand that excuse. But how does that bike get left with a ECU in it that's got the incorrect map in?
Yeah, correct.
There's
and if that's the valid and the actual excuse, well, that's very poor of whether it's Aprilia, the electronics technician, that's absolutely poor. 100%, Robbie. You know, how does it make Agura feel? He's the one who puts in all the effort, and because some oak didn't do his job correctly, he gets disqualified. You know, they didn't just say, okay, we'll give you a 10-second penalty. He got disqualified. When last did you hear of a guy getting disqualified in MotoGP? Probably the last one was Roman Fenati when he tried to grab the Oak's front brake. I can't even remember who it was. You know, it just doesn't happen. So that, to me, I think is the issue. And I don't buy Davide Brivio palming it off. I think he also, and I've got a lot of respect for him, I think he should have come out. If that's the true story, people make mistakes. We understand that. At this level, it's a difficult one. But come out and say that. Say, listen, this was the story and this is what happens. And we take responsibility. It had nothing to do with Agura. You know, but they haven't actually done that, eh?
Yeah. Alex van der Berg and Sven Gruner said it earlier, and I was going to bring it up. There was the same penalty that Brad had 2016 in Jerez, where he started at the back of the grid in Moto3s and landed up winning it. So it was brilliant entertainment, but the same thing. So on the IO bike here to start in last place. That's it. I watched Qatar and Argentina from 2015 last night. Two brilliant races that you don't see like of these days. They need to get rid of the aero and ride height. It's turning into Formula One on two wheels. That's Olimoto. Look, I am excited for 2027 with the reduced aero, the kind of change up Pirelli tires coming in. We saw what an effect they've had in Moto3 and Moto2, just like, what was it, 3 or 4 seconds faster? It's like, it's a faster tire. Pirelli's always been a faster tire. So I'm excited for that. The frustrating thing is it's still 2 years away. We've got to put up with this, as you said, next or 2 weeks' time, talking about potentially KTM and struggling again and Marc dominating and that. So it's still a long way from that. But yeah, Olimoto, I do agree with you. But in the same breath, I can honestly say I watch Marc every corner on that Ducati. For me, it's a joy to watch. Yeah, I know there's no overtaking and it's not those battles that you're talking about, and there's no one taking out anyone anymore, and there's no, fairing bashing and stuff. But I can really appreciate watching Marc go that fast, being in that control on that motorcycle. It's poetry in motion to me. Paul, also just touching upon Aprilia, there's also this big factor of the number one rider in MotoGP that we seem to sadly be forgetting about, Jorge Martin, and how he fits into this puzzle. We said there was podium contention there, certainly in Thailand, because Bezzecchi and Ayagura showed that, and Martin, being the talent that he's in, will fit right in there. Another good showing. I was disappointed with Bezzecchi, and he came out and he said it was his mistake. It was a silly mistake to make in the turn one. I think that is, and as he said, that's almost a reaction to a bad qualifying. Okay, I know I've got podium pace here, but I'm in 8th or 9th place. If I could just make up 4 positions in turn one and got it horribly wrong. I was keen to see where he would have fit into it. Could have been potentially more trouble for Pecco Bagnaia, to be honest. But again, with Ayagura and a little bit that Bezzecchi was showing, they must be rubbing their hands, waiting for Jorge Martin to climb on that bike and get a bit of momentum. The sad thing is yes, he's missing Kota, which I think is a good thing. They had the press conference where they live, FaceTimed him, which I thought was quite a nice touch, with Marc and Pecco talking to him, saying, "We miss you. You're the number one man. We want you here." Making the decision to miss Kota, I think's a good one. We spoke about it. Kota's, it's just going to batter you even more. Potentially Qatar could be out, so potentially a while, but he's also going to need time. He's not going to just climb on that bike and be competitive straight away. He's going to need a race meeting or potentially 2 to really dial himself into that Aprilia, because it's still got 1 or 2 niggly little gripes. but we've seen Martin override these things. So that's an exciting factor that we still have to see come into this so far boring, it's the only way you can say it, championship.
Yeah, Rob, I can't wait. I think he's going to be fantastic. And exactly what you said there, I think he's going to, based on this weekend's form, he's going to give Pecco a proper run for his money. I firmly believe that. So the question we need to ask, which was bandied around on the weekend, Aprilia are applying to have him given dispensation to be able to test the bike before he does come back and race. Who was it from Ducati who said, no, they don't think they're happy to change it for next year, but this year they don't know if it's a good idea.
Yes.
My personal opinion, and I know this is just a very basic answer, I think it would be a fair decision, and I think it would be the right decision to let him give him 2 days. It can be at a track where they don't race, or at a track they're only racing at the end of the year. I don't mind. I think safety-wise, it would be good just to see where he is, which is what Aprilia are selling the idea to the rest of MotoGP, to say the injury is okay. Obviously, that it's a way bigger issue than that, because then you've got to go back to Marc Marquez missed out how much time? He wasn't allowed to test before he made his 4 different comebacks. I understand rules need to change from time to time. I think it would be the right thing to do. You don't want the Oak to come back. He hasn't ridden. His strength will be good. He'll be on some sort of road bike at a track testing beforehand anyway, because they can do that. But it's not a MotoGP bike. So I think it would be a good thing. The questions are then, do they quickly slip on 2 new parts for him to test? So I understand it's a much bigger problem. And then going forward, how do they regulate it? So if you miss 2 races, you get 1 day. If you've missed 4 races, you get 2. I don't know. Yeah. So that's the reality of it. I just think because of what he missed all the testing, and we understand through his own fault, if you want to point blame. But I do think they need to look at that. So we're dealing with 300 plus horsepower bikes where everyone else is in the groove, and you don't want the Oak to come back and now he's overriding and possibly take someone else out. He's mature, he's a racer, he understands what needs to be done. But I do think it's time they looked at some kind of a dispensation. How they work it out, I don't know. But I think it would be a good thing to start putting into the rule book and saying, okay, you missed X amount, you get this amount of test days.
I agree with you. Certainly as MotoGP champion, I think he really does warrant that. And the fact that you take in, a brand new team and a brand new package for him. Yeah. From a rider safety point of view, I think it's a good idea. So let's see. Maybe that's something that they could potentially look at and bring in. There was a comment here, Robert Swartz asking about what do we think about the Bezzecchi rear-ending Quartararo. He's done it to Pecco before and a couple of other riders. Yeah, he came out, admitted the mistake. I do think Bezzecchi, like Morbidelli, can sometimes be lost scope. We've seen it in the past as well. I just think he knew, he was the last rider to win the main race a couple of years ago. He's a factory Aprilia rider now. Didn't get qualifying right. I just think, rushed to the head. Too much testosterone going into turn 1, just got it horribly wrong, and he's come out and said that. But Robert, I agree with you. It's something that you do need to watch. And I haven't heard anything about a penalty or anything, but everyone in the comments, and Paul, what do you think of that? I mean, we know was it the Moto3, Munoz got his penalty carried over from the last race into this race weekend. In a normal situation, that would be a penalty for Bezzecchi. Does that warrant a penalty? Should he get a penalty for the next ride?
Yeah, part of me says yes, part of me says no. He definitely messed up, and it's not his first offense. So I think that's what they need to take into account. And I'm going back 4 or 5 years ago when we had dive bomb Darryn. Yeah. They then picked on that guy no matter what he did. If he just blinked the wrong way, they'd highlight it, whether he got a penalty or not, or, it seems like certain riders, and I'm not saying Bezzecchi's one of them, but it's not his first offense. So maybe what they should have done with Simon taking over, new slate now, but then they should have come out and said, okay, Marco, that's your first warning. The next time you do the same stupid thing, you're getting a double long lap penalty or ride through the pits or whatever the case might be. So as of right now, he's got away with it scot-free. It It ruined Quartararo's race. Doesn't mean Quartararo is going to win. But, so there was a consequence. Had he just crashed all on his own and not taken or run into anyone else, then maybe it's okay. But he's done it before. So I think they need to have some kind of a, just keeping tabs on it. Possibly they're doing that. I don't know. Nothing gets mentioned to say, okay, here's your yellow card. Next time it's a red card, whatever the penalties are. It was a 50-50, but definitely in turn one to do that, that's brain fade. I mean, if you saw how fast he was going when everyone else was already on the brakes, that 1 second that he delayed his braking is 80, 100 k's an hour. It's massive. So, just a brain fade moment. And with consequences, never mind the fact that fortunately he didn't get injured and neither did anybody else. He's the main Aprilia guy at the moment. He needs to be bringing that bike home. That's all he has to do. He got no data to see if they're heading in the right direction. Zero. So that doesn't help them at all. As you say, bad qualifying, but still, if he had got through turn one in 8th, he probably would have finished the race in 4th, 5th, 6th. But anyway, so I think it needs to be addressed, but it's a very difficult one because we've seen Brad do it, not taking anyone out, but we've seen Brad make up 4 or 5 places in turn one, but by being smart, not by being do or die kind of attitude.
But this is my argument now. So Alex van der Berg says, apparently Bez was issued with a written warning. If he offends again, he will be penalized according to some article I read. But Johnny Martin says here, it was deemed a racing incident by Simon and his team. Same as for Brad being taken out by Morbidelli in the sprint. But here's my argument. So Fermin Aldeguer on Miguel Oliveira was a takeout. A brain fade, a stupid moment, takes him out. Gets a long lap penalty, as far as I remember.
He served a long lap penalty.
So what's the difference?
Where's the consistency?
What's the difference? I know racing. No, it's not a racing incident. He admittedly says, I broke way too late. What did Fermin Aldeguer do? Broke way too late and shoved it on the inside of Oliveira. Okay, they both crashed. Oliveira crashed, and we'll talk about him quickly to end the show off. But that's where I look at it and go, no, that doesn't sit well with me. If Aldeguer's one gets a long lap penalty, surely Bez should, which means it carries over to the next one.
Carries over.
If it's not a written warning, okay, fine. But then why didn't Fermin Aldeguer get a written warning? Again, if Simon Crayford came out at the end of the day and explained it all, the world would be a happy place. So, MotoGP, there's some advice for you. I might actually even just bring it up with him when I go to Silverstone and see if they don't throw me out first. Well, let's quickly end the show off with Yamaha. Talking about Brad finding that time in the Pecco toe, Alex Rins was very, very much the same. No pace the whole weekend. Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere by himself. Tags. Oh God,
Marquez.
And looked good, like closing brakes and everything. And then all of a sudden goes 1.2 seconds faster than he did the entire weekend. So this, again, is another indication of, apart from following and finding a good line and being a marker, it's got to do something to the feeling of the bike. It just has to. Because how do you do it there and not, you've learned the line, now you've seen what he's doing, but now put it to practice by yourself. The bike just behaves differently. So, I really took note of what Simon Crayford said about that aero, and that aero is there to manipulate the wind and what's coming at it. It's coming at you differently when you've got a bike in front of you, especially if it's in that prime spot. With the bikes that I work with, Zero motorcycles, the electric bikes, I can increase my range on that bike by 20-30% overall. If I slipstream behind, one of those big tour buses, because they can do 70 mile an hour legally here on the highway. If I get behind a big truck or something in the slow lane, they can only do 50 mile an hour. So it's like pointless. So I get behind that at 70 mile an hour, which is 120 k's an hour. And I sit, if I'm too close, and it shows me a live reading of my voltage and stuff. If I'm too close, no benefit. If I'm too far, no benefit. If I'm in that pocket, that voltage shoots down, and I promise you my range just goes straight down. So there is an effect. That's just a little note that I made. But overall for Yamaha, looking at what Honda are doing, there were signs certainly from Quartararo. Quartararo still got this unfortunate habit of, if he doesn't get the start, if things don't go right for him, almost in the first 4 laps. He battles to recover from it. Now, listen, he was taken out, and I don't know the severity of his bike being damaged or him, so I don't expect it here. But, Alex Rins finishing top Yamaha in 11th, which is technically 12th with Ayagura, 21 seconds behind, and then Miller behind him, 23 seconds. Miller's got to sort out this tire management thing. He just can't, as much as I love Jack, he can't go into every race weekend just drilling tires in a main race and not learning. And then Fabio in 14th after that. Still some head scratching for them to do. And I think, Cota's going to be a very tricky outing for them.
Yeah, and just on that point, Miller, I've highlighted it. I believe I'm right. I could be wrong. He's doing what he did at KTM. Fantastic in the first couple of races, and then steadily works his way to mid-pack. I hope he proves me wrong. I'll be the first to admit it. But he proved me wrong last race. But this race, he's gone back to Jack Miller, the regular thing. The Yamahas, going to your point of Rins following Marquez and Quartararo being able to follow, is it not a case of they only have and I must be very delicate how I phrase this, the concentration span to do it for 1 or 2 laps, where the Marc Marquez's, Pecco Bagnaia's, they can do that fast pace, lap after lap after lap. That's something I thought about, because I understand the aero. And what you're saying is now suddenly the bike, maybe it's a little bit looser, so it's the aero is less impactful when you're that close in the sweet spot.
Yes.
I fully agree with that. But is it not a case also of not being able to just churn out those 37.6, 37.6, which Brad can do that?
Yeah.
He might not have the right equipment, but he can churn out the fastest lap that the KTM can give him, lap after lap after. So that's just something to chuck in there as a, ponder on that one. See, we don't know the answer, but it could be. I think Rins is the perfect example of that. He can go fast for 1 lap, but then in the race, he can't get anywhere near that, not even close. And I understand they set the bikes up differently for qualifying. Weight is different, weight distribution is different. But, come race pace, and he's running with Raul Fernandez, who, believe it or not, was there.
Geez, he's just another one that's just, enough's enough for me. I don't know how much longer it's going to last. But talking about enough's enough, we speak about Yamaha and this lineup, 2 extra bikes, and then on the grid, Alex Rins, full respect and credit for what he's done in the past. The fact he's got a 2-year deal, I think he's taking up a really good ride there now. I do think he's damaged goods. I don't think it's going to get much better for him. I think Quartararo will have the glimpses of excellence that we've seen from the former world champion. I don't think he's going to be the answer for Yamaha either. Miller, I don't think is the answer. I think he'll bring some valuable information, but I certainly don't think he's the answer. If you look at the Honda camp, you with a Zarco, you can see an answer there. With Amir, if he sorts this out, he was battered by a bad handling Honda, but I think he also switched off mentally for a while, and he seems to have come back. Marini's got that finer touch, and we spoke about having that plan, with this guy in this position, Nakagami here, and this and this and this. Yamaha don't seem to have really put that into practice just yet. And I looked at them overall on the weekend, and I went, you've got an Oliveira that just, touches the black stuff and gets injured. Yeah, it was a big crash, but, I don't see how Oliveira comes back from this. This is a guy that I have massive respect for, and is such a great guy, such a gentleman to me. Every time I see him at the racetrack, he's always the first to greet me and ask me how the family is, and a fantastic guy. Same with Jack Miller. I just can't see in this modern day MotoGP where it gets any better for them. And Yamaha have got to be looking at that and doing exactly what we said. Look what Ayagura in 2 races has done for Aprilia. 2 races.
Yeah.
Oliveira and Jack can't do that. Yamaha have got to be. Oliveira's on a 2-year deal, which is manic to me. It's just absolutely manic to me. Same with Rins. But if I was Yamaha's hierarchy, I'd be looking at this going, right, Canet, potentially. Manu Gonzalez, if they haven't signed up already, they are stupid, because Ducati have lost 2 bikes and they've got people waiting. So this is the chance for Yamaha, a Brad Binder, Pedro Acosta. There's a couple of really good options for them that they'll miss out on if they want to be loyal and nice to the likes of Miguel and Alex. So I think there's big decisions to be made there if they really want to make an impact and get themselves challenging near the front again.
And I hope, which I'd said towards the end of last year when we knew that Miguel and Jack had signed with the new Pramac team, I was disappointed. I said, put new blood on the bike. Even if it was one rider, so Jack or Miguel as the experienced long-term investment to get the
Information
bike
guy.
going.
Yeah.
Correct. And now get a guy with, like we said, no expectation.
Slow.
Pedro showed that last year. Yes, he maybe is a cut above all the other Moto2 riders from last year. But he went into MotoGP, no expectations, and he showed what he could do straight away, off the bat. Now, Yamaha missed a trick there. I said it about Honda too. Put on someone, and in fact, Zarco's proving me wrong. He's showing me that he has got the determination. I thought he took the ride because he had no other option, which was partially true, but he certainly showed that. Chandra, you can't hold anything against him. He's there to cover a market. There's also a financial implication to them, which they take care of. So take him out of the equation. You can't fault him for taking the ride. If you had offered the ride 6 months ago to almost anyone else, the Honda, you were struggling to get someone on that bike. Suddenly now, KTM are in that boat, and you're going to see Honda having maybe one or two named riders queuing up, knocking on the door. But let's see. Yamaha need to make a shift, and unfortunately, this year is not looking great for them. I think Jack will hold on to the ride. He always does that till the very last. And Oliveira, as you say, if he comes back from this injury, he's not just going to walk out. Or so we'll see. And if he misses the next couple of rides, who they're going to put on the bike?
Well, it's Augusto Fernandez at the moment. He's become a very busy test rider because Johnny Ray's out, so he's doing World Superbike
testing.
He did well signing that test rider role.
It would actually be an interesting exercise if he does race, because he's got a comparison. Last year's race in the KTM. Put him on the Yamaha, and we know where he fits in. He fits in probably fair 16 to 12th. And if he does better than that, then we can say, but this package actually isn't too bad. So maybe it would be a blessing in disguise, and I'm not wishing Miguel any injury that keeps him off the bike. I don't like to see injured riders. But if that is the case, the injuries happen, maybe that would be Yamaha could then say, actually we made the wrong decision here. Yes. That's the only way we'll know, Rob.
Yeah, it's those kind of exercises that need to happen, I think the Marc exercise has opened up that whole can of worms. Whereas, this bike's not working. I mean, Marc was that Sachsenring weekend where he crashed 5 times, riding and crashing. He's now climbed on
zap signs.
He's climbed on a show, and he's, you talk about the marketing implications of why he signed Marc Marquez, 8 times world champion, and a marketing exercise. You could see that by the first 2 weekends. Jorge Martin, bless him, world champion, number 1.
Yeah.
If you see 10 Jorge Martin shirts, you're lucky in caps. There's 15 gazillion million Marc Marquez 93 Ducati hats now. So Ducati have really got that right. The injury to Mugello, 2 runs at Mugello last year is really what set him back. Alex van den Berg, Jake Dixon to replace Oliveira, smiley face. Alex, honestly, I think Dorna rub their hands together when they see Jake Dixon do well, because they really want that British passport. And as I said, in many ways, I do hope that he keeps it all together, just uses his words carefully and just lets his riding do the talking more often than not, and can go into MotoGP, because I would rather see a Jake Dixon as opposed to Oliveira, to be honest, just as an exercise. I've seen Oliveira now. I think he's got a beautiful family waiting for him at home. His body is got to that point. Same with Alex Rins, where it's just injury after injury. Danny Pedrosa was in that same kind of boat, so there comes a point where, let's look at the other options. So, I wouldn't mind seeing that happen. Let's end the show, Paul, with this left field question here from Gavin Caldenas. Is Brad's manager saying, let's put you out to the market, and Brad says no? Why are the other managers picking up rides for their very average riders like Oliveira and Miller and ... So, Gavin, from my experience, Bob Moore is Brad and Darren's manager, has been for a long time. He's a massive reason why, Brad and Darryn have got where they have financially and career-wise. He really has been there for the boys. He loves the boys. He has the boys' best interest at heart at all times. He's more than a manager. He's part of the family there. He really is. Paul, I looked at a couple of, and you see it every now and then, the rider salaries get released, the top 10 rider salaries, and Brad wasn't in that top 10. Every single other rider, Mia, okay, yeah, previous world champion, fine, Bastianini, Vinales, all these other riders are ahead of Brad, and not just ahead, but ahead. From what I understand, if you look at the papers, Brad earns like a 1 million or 1.2 million a year, and the other guys are on 2 million, 3 million plus. Fabio Quartararo 12 million, Marquez 10, whatever. So Brad's still on a very basic salary in terms of MotoGP salary. And I look at that, and I look at everything that goes on, and I think, is it a case of Brad KTM just always, and Brad's always signed these long-term deals with KTM, so it's a comfort zone thing, and they looked after him, they've given him this career, they've looked after him, Brad feels loyal to them, is paying them back. I don't know. That's a hard question to answer, because I have no doubt that Bob will be going out looking for Brad's best interests and potentially be coming and sitting down and saying, right, these are our options. And I have no doubt that when teams see a Bob Moore coming, they will open their door, because they know it's to talk about Brad, and he is hot property in that paddock in many ways. But in many ways, Ollie Moto and a lot of other guys will be the first to say, yeah, he's hot property in many ways, but also not, because of his record. Hasn't won a race in 3 years, and we looking at 7th and saying it's a great result. Is it? Frankie Morbidelli is there. Pedro Acosta's just got youth on his side and name and Spanish passport, and he has done incredible things, showed great pace last year. But Brad was tied into a contract with KTM already when this Pramac Yamaha deal on that came up. Had he not been, I think that would have been a good choice. Ollie Moto says BMW here. Brad, for me, personal opinion, again, a fanboy cap on, Brad needs a Marc Marquez reset. He needs a Marc Marquez reset. He needs to climb on a Cressini Ducati, a la Alex Marquez, go and restart his career. Get as much money as you can, but he needs a reset now. I think he's got, modern day MotoGP, the way Brad looks after himself and these riders are athletes, got a good 3 years of being competitive, but only on the right package. I think he wants to be primarily set up for 2027. And at the moment, we can say, oh, yeah, it's all going to be reset in 2027. KTM, watch out for them then.
Yeah.
No, there's too much. There's too much going on at KTM. There's too much cloud above them. Get yourself into a Pramac or a Trackhouse. Raul Fernandez, I think that will be a great spot, as you said earlier. Get yourself in there in an Aprilia, which seems to be a good, consistent package the last couple of years. Martin will make the package better. Agura will make the package better. Vidzecki will make the package better, and get yourself into that kind of environment and then take it from there. And that, I say that with a heavy heart, because KTM has done so much, and I've got a lot of ties to KTM, but at some point you do have to say enough's enough. Just like Rossi did with Ducati. This is great, and I get a lot of money, and it would be great, but I've got a career to think about. Yeah, cheers. And Mark did the same, and look what happened.
Yeah, you see what the problem is in this scenario. I don't believe Brad has much wiggle room. When he signed his contract, if I'm correct, they signed in 2021. He had won a couple of races. The KTM project was looking good. It had progressed. It seemed to have been on a very good upward trajectory. So he took a long-term view, and he signed a 5-year contract, which, let's be quite honest, is unheard of. I mean, Marquez at the height of his Honda career signed a 4-year contract. Okay, so I think Brad's lack of wiggle room, he's not a Marc Marquez. Marquez left Honda. He bought himself out of the contract or whatever they did. Honda got as much exposure from that, from him leaving, as they got from him staying there and finishing 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th.
Yes.
So they were almost happy to say, listen, this works for both sides.
Headlines. Yeah.
Brad is not going to generate that kind of headline. Very under 5-year contract, and next year is the last year. They might just say, well, Brad's lucky to still be on a KTM. So that's point number one. Point number two, I believe that most of these contracts, a la Johan Zarco and Paul Espargaro, they have an out at some point. Normally it's performance related, rider and equipment. Now, surely if that's the case, this is the year. Because remember, Brad didn't really have a leg to stand on, because if he said, but we did so cuck, KTM would say, but you were the best after the Ducatis. So now you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So this year, it seems like Honda may finish ahead of them. Aprilia, when Martin comes back, if Agura can not get disqualified, there could be a couple of bikes that may finish ahead of Brad. So if there is a buyout clause due to performance, there might be an out. Now, this is where Bob Moore, who you've mentioned it, he works for them tirelessly and for their benefit. He's an American. Trackhouse Racing is an American. There's absolutely zero chance they're going to keep Raul Fernandez for next year. I mean, that'd be ridiculous. That's an option.
I'll boycott MotoGP if they.
100%. So hopefully Bob is already having lunch with whatever that oak's name who owns the team, and Davide Brivio. That would be my opinion. Whether we know more about the contract or not, if there are these escape clauses, whatever. But, Brad, unfortunately, isn't a Marc Marquez that, he can make things happen. So I don't know how locked in he is. My feeling exactly what you say. Time for a reset, Brad. You've been loyal. We love it. We back you 100%. And if you go to Aprilia, we'll back you 100%. But I do think this project has kind of got to its ceiling. The financial woes don't help it in any way either. And, we could carry on with this until we know the details of his contract. I don't know if it's a reality, but I'd love to see it happen.
The scariest thing was, and we touched upon it at the end of last year, it was always going to be a good indication of where the bike was to see Maverick and Bastianini climb on it. And that is the clearest indication that, hang on, these guys, Brad and Pedro are riding this bike way above where it should be week in, week out. That's where the bike actually is. It's time now, unfortunately. Paul, that's time for us then. It's been a great chat, just over 2 hours. Fantastic as always. Everybody's comments and input, really appreciated. Answering the questions that we don't quite get to. It's always fabulous just being the open conversation that it is. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all keep well and enjoy the next couple of weeks before Kota. I know Oli Moto asked for predictions for Kota. I don't know what to say. I mean, the king of Kota, I think, is going to come back. Let's see if anyone can touch the dominance that is Marc Marquez and Alex Marquez for Kota.
And me, I'm going with those two, and I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I'm going to say Zarco on the podium in the race, not the sprint. I'm going to go with Zarco. I just have a feeling that, Kota, Honda won there 2 years ago with Rins. They like the track. The bike works. It's working better now. Let's see what happens.
Yes, that brand new white cap gives you superpowers, Paulie. I like
That's a bold statement, if ever there was one.
Paul, thank you so much, man. Everybody, thank you so much. Keep well, and until next time, stay tuned. If I can get the Esmond boys for next week, Tuesday, I'll post it up on the Motor Rider World page latest the day of that Tuesday in the morning, like I do with this. So stay tuned. Hopefully we can pull that off. Good night.
Awesome. Thanks everyone who listened. And Rob, thanks for another fantastic evening. Look forward to the next one.